Hinata, Ino said. She threw her arms around the weird-eyed girl. What you brought for lunch today? She asked curiously as she pulled away from the brief hug. She then sat on the empty chair next her friend. Hinata pulled out a lunchbox with the Hyuga logo embedded on it, and removed the lid to show a beautiful packed lunch with rice, octopus-shaped sausage and veggies on the side. Would you like some, Ino? Hinata asked. Hell no, you know I'm on a diet. A girl in love mustn't fall behind the fight. As Ino said this, her eyes trailed to Sasuke, who was eating lunch by himself. Not that there's much competition, you know, but I gotta always stay ahead in this war. Then I guess I should say hang in there, Ino, Hinata said, sympathetically, but you should eat more often. Hinata knew that her advice would fall on deaf ears, but decided she wanted to remind Ino of this anyways. No pain, no gain, at least that's what they say. Ino replied. Oi, Ino, pig over here. Sakura peeked inside the classroom and made a hand gesture which went along with her words. There's something funny going on outside. Naruto pulled another prank, Sakura said. Seriously, that clown never learns. He's so gonna get caught, Ino said. There was amusement in her voice as she stood up and ran down to meet Sakura by the door. I'll be back, Hinata. With a wave, Ino left the shy Hyuga girl eating lunch by herself. I don't know why you associate yourself with such a troublesome girl, Shikamaru said. He had just finished witnessing the exchange between Hinata and Ino. In his opinion, he thought Hinata was better off with other friends. Ino could be sort of toxic to be around. Hinata finally turned around and looked at him in the eyes. Shikamaru had his chin resting on his hand. He raised an eyebrow and waited for a response from the girl. Hinata cocked her head in confusion. You mean Ino? I don't understand why you're asking when you're also her friend, Hinata said. We're only childhood friends because our family are close. The decision was completely forced on me from a young age, Shikamaru replied. Well, I look up to her. She saved me from some bullies back before I joined the academy, Hinata replied. At this, Shikamaru lifted his head and scrutinized his classmate, as if to check if the girl was trying to deceive him. And you're sure it was the same girl? Shikamaru asked suspiciously. Hinata stifled a giggle and nodded. Yes, I'm very sure, Hinata said, as she even told me her name was Ino. His brown eyes trailed to the clock on the classroom mess wall. What a drag. I just lost 3 minutes of my time. I'm gonna take a nap now. Bye, Hinata, Shikamaru said, ending the conversation as he went back to resting his head on the desk. Sleep well, she said. Not knowing what else to say, Hinata then turned to her lunch and finished it in silence as light snores could be heard from behind her. Hinata, Ino's excited voice cut through the crowd. Hinata clung, uncertain, to her sachet as she searched the crowd for Ino. It was the first day of summer, but she still wore her coat. It was also a weekend, and she managed her father's permission to go out to purchase new clothes with friends. Hinata couldn't wait to get a new coat, maybe something that wasn't gray this time. Hinata swung around after she felt a tap on the shoulder. Ino stood there, next to Sakura. Both had friendly smiles on the faces. I'm glad you're on time, Hinata said. Course we are, Sakura replied. Why Ryu? Always so polite. Hinata, we're friends, you can be like yo Ino sup Sakura or something, Ino said. Ino, what the hell are you talking about? That sounds so masculine, Sakura said while giggling. By then they had walked a few shops until the summer colors and styles caught Ino's and Sakura's attention, while the all-winter-long winter shop called Hinata's attention. Nua, don't even think about that, Ino said as she caught Hinata staring at a winter clothing store. Hinata, we're getting you out of that coat, whether you like it or not. Why? Hinata asked. Don't you want to be pretty? Ino asked. Hinata blinked upon being asked this question. She didn't exactly care about her appearance. Well, that actually was a lie. Hinata believed that if she looked more like a boy, then her father would treat her differently. She had wanted to show her father how serious by not being girly and wearing oversized clothes to hide her feminine figure, but it didn't seem like the boyish look made a difference. She was still considered weak. I don't know, Hinata replied. Don't you want to be confident? Ino asked while raising her voice even louder. Of course Hinata wanted to be more confident, but the shy girl doubted that would ever be possible, yet she replied, yes, as she stared at the ground. It would be truly nice to be able to be as confident as Ino. Don't you want to feel free in your own body? Ino yelled at the top of her lungs. At this point, some adults walking by giggled. At the 11-year-old Ino, who truly believed her mind was that of a mature adult. Okay, Ino pig, I think she gets it, Sakura said. She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms, feeling annoyed that there were a few eyes on them because Ino was being loud. She wasn't liking all the adult attention on them. Shut it, forehead, Ino said. Make me the banter stopped when Ino decided not to take the bait. Instead, she turned to Hinata, and with a friendly smile she said, all I'm saying is that shedding your coat will be like the first step towards confidence. Trust me, I know this stuff, Ino said. With a sigh, Hinata followed the two girls inside the colorful store, but instead of colorful summer clothes, Hinata ended up purchasing dark clothes that would later become her new uniform. It was the last day of school. Everyone who graduated were to return to their classrooms so that they could be assigned to teams. Hinata stared at the clock. It seemed like Ino and Sakura were going to be late. Her lips pressed together into a frown. In the last 5 months, something happened that put a strain between Ino and Sakura's friendship. They became enemies when Ino found out Sakura had a crush on Sasuke. Hinata tried to remain neutral, but it was hard not to be biased and hope for Ino's happiness. Not to say Hinata wished for Sasuke to notice her friend. She merely wished Ino would just get over him. It has also been 5 months since Hinata had been sporting her new signature look: black sleeveless turtleneck shirt, fishnet arm sleeves, gray shorts, thigh-high stockings and black ninja shoes. Her hair fell past her shoulder since she had stopped trimming it, but her new look did not help boost her confidence at all. All it accomplished was having her name get a few votes on the list, created by an anonymous classmate, which rated her as one of the most attractive girls in class, which had mortified her. Her attractive, they were obviously blind. To be attractive is to have confidence. Like Ino, therefore, she wasn't attractive. The door slid open, and Hinata released a sigh, happy to see the two girls had made it on time. It looked like it was one of those days where they raced to see who had arrived first to class. After a few banter and name-calling, they stopped bickering when they noticed Hinata stood up and turned to them. It's the last day of school. You two should make up already, Hinata said while letting her agitation slip through. Sakura crossed her arms and looked away, as Ino couldn't bother to listen to the advice. Instead, Hinata, Ino said, as she walked around to give her a hug. Oi, we aren't done yet. I definitely won this race, Sakura yelled at the top of her lungs. When her emerald eyes met Hinata's, her anger subsided a bit. Sakura then went on to inspect the classroom for a certain dark-haired boy of the Uchiha lineage. Once she found him, she seemed deep in thought and mystified by what she was seeing. Sasuke was sitting by himself, and Sakura felt like she finally had the courage to go up to him and say hi. Hinata and Ino followed the trajectory of Sakura's gaze, and they both noticed it obviously landed on Sasuke. But at the same time, Hinata noticed Naruto was looking at Sakura in admiration. Hinata smiled to herself, as she was happy for Sakura having an admirer. It was amazing to be a witness of love blooming. Hinata giggled to herself as Naruto blushed and looked away from Sakura. Poor Naruto, he thinks Sakura is looking at him, Hinata thought sadly, yet at the same time, she was envious of Naruto's feelings. She wished could feel those kinds of feelings for someone else. There was a time Ino made a joke about Hinata being defected or something just because the shy girl never had a crush on any of their classmates. How could Hinata even think about love? She didn't have time. All that was constantly on her mind was training and thinking of ways of improving for her clan's sake. And not just that, it was silly. But Hinata was working on a thesis to persuade her father to abolish the division of their clan. Sakura skipped happily to Sasuke's desk. Hey Sakura, Ino said as kind of warning, but was ignored by Pink. Good morning Sakura. Naruto greeted Sakura with a bright smile. Annoyed by Naruto's intrusion, Sakura shoved him out of the way. Naruto Hinata was surprised to have seen him fall to the floor in such a painful-looking manner. His head bumped against the desk. Hinata had spoken to them before, but their conversation never strayed outside classwork, when they would get paired up in work, but he never did. Sure, he was a bad student, but that does mean he deserved to be treated like that. What Sakura did to him was unforgivable. Hinata moved from the back row and made her way towards the front. In seconds, she kneeled next to Naruto and asked him if he was okay. Lavender eyes met blue eyes, and her only thought was how she wished she had been born with his eyes' colors. They were so blue, like the ocean, and being up close made her feel like she might drown in them. She forced herself to look away as she extended her hand and helped him stand. Meanwhile, morning Sasuke, Sakura said shyly. Hinata and Naruto turned around, and for the first time in her life, Hinata had ill thoughts of Sakura. Hinata walked up to Sakura with the intentions of asking her friend to apologize to Naruto. When she was about to tap Sakura in the shoulder, she paused, because Sasuke glanced up at Sakura. "Mind if I sit next to you?" Sakura asked. Hinata gripped her fist and took a deep breath to calm down. Perhaps it was best not to confront Sakura just yet. Ino came to Hinata's rescue, or so she thought. The blonde female friend grabbed Sakura by the arm, and just when Hinata thought Ino was going to step in and reproach Sakura about pushing Naruto around, her friend Ino betrayed her by fighting over Sasuke. "Hey, I'm going to sit next to Sasuke," Ino said. The debate continued as more girls joined in the fight, claiming that they were there first, since first come first serve. Right, Hinata took the opportunity to pull Naruto by his hand and away from the growing mob of girls who fought over who was going to sit next to Sasuke. This is going to get intense," Hinata said to Naruto, "so we need to get away from the battlefield." "Hey, thanks for earlier. I didn't know you were this nice since you always hung around Ino and Sakura," Naruto said, as he allowed himself to be dragged to the where Hinata normally sits. "Are really?" Hinata asked as she finally let go of his hand. "I didn't know some people thought of me like that," she mused out loud. "Don't worry, I now know you're definitely nice. Believe it," Naruto said. Once they settled next to each other, Hinata noticed Naruto's expression. He looked hurt and rejected, but he also looked angry. "Naruto," Hinata said with the intention of getting his attention just to tell him that there are more fish in the seas. "Gore, it's always Sasuke this and that. What is so great about that guy?" Naruto said while giving Sasuke the stinky eye, even though the preteen could see it since he was looking forward. "Don't even bother trying to figure it out," Shikamaru said plainly. From behind, both turned around to look at the lazy classmate. "Women are so irrational." Shikamaru suddenly felt that his comment did not extend to Hinata. "Except for Hinata, she falls outside the standard deviation," he said. Hinata giggled behind her hand at the statement. "So I'm an outlier?" Hinata asked. Naruto looked back and forth between his two classmates as he could follow the conversation. "Man, I wish I had popcorn," Kuja said as he walked up to them and sat next to Shikamaru. The four then turned back to the group of girls that was still fighting over Sasuke. "I don't get it. You already have chips," Naruto pointed out. It was true. Kuja had been stuffing his face the whole time. Kuja gave a slight shoulder shrug. "Chips are chips. Popcorn is popcorn," Kuja said as though his statement was self-evident. But it made sense in their head. Iruka-sensei walked inside, breaking up the girls' verbal fights. In the end, Sakura ended up sitting to Sasuke's right, and Ino to Sasuke's left. "Guess it's a tie again, Ino pig," Sakura said. "Dream on forehead girl," Ino said dryly. Iruka-sensei read out the names of which genie would be on which team, and when it came to Hinata, she really didn't care about who her team was as long as they were nice people who will help her get stronger. "Hinata Hyuga," Iruka-sensei said as his eyes made contact with Hinata. The shy girl wondered if the pause was necessary, or if Iruka-sensei loved making their student feel some sort of suspense. "Kiba Inazuma," Iruka-sensei said. When his eyes landed on Kiba, he could see a menacing smile form on the young kid's lips. But what Iruka-sensei didn't know was that Kiba was really happy to be on the same team as a Hyuga. He could wait to show off. After all, he believed that his family were the best trackers there is. "Shino Aburage," Iruka-sensei read out loud. However, when he looked around the classroom, he had a hard time finding the young boy, but Iruka didn't dwell on it too much and just gave up. This made Shino adjust his glasses and swore to never forgive his sensei for not noticing where he was sitting. "All right, Team 8," Kurenai said, excitedly. "Ready for your first D-rank mission?" Kurenai received an enthusiastic response from Kiba. Akamaru and Hinata, who threw their fist in the air. However, the only one that remained quiet was Shino. Kiba and Hinata cocked their head and looked at the mysterious boy. He wasn't too much of a talker, and his bugs were creepy, so it was going to take time to get used to their teammate. Common man, show some enthusiasm, Kiba said to Shino. If I show enthusiasm, it would be fake. Why? Because I know that D missions are just chores we do for other civilians. Why? Because the ninjas require a way to make money, Shino replied. The rest of Team 8 stood there, stunned. They didn't know that Shino could actually talk this much. I see. So we definitely have a know-it-all on our team, Kurenai said, while smiling. Since you guys are ready, let me read out your first mission. Shino had been right. After Kurenai was done reading out the mission, Hinata and Kiba's enthusiasm was leached out of them by some unknown entity. It was as if a grim reaper had taken the fun out of life by swinging its scythe. Kurenai-sensei, Hinata said. Why do we have to pull out potatoes? I know, Shino said. It's because we need the money. But is there a lesson out of this? There's no lesson, Kurenai said, while smirking. But don't worry, thanks to me, we're gonna have fun on our first mission. Yeah right, Kurenai-sensei, don't lie to us, Kiba said. Akamaru barked as if trying to back him up. Well, my young genins, they don't call me the Genjutsu mistress for nothing, Kurenai replied. The sound of her chuckle made her young genin feel unsettled. Reality crumbled after the mission began. The farm was gone, and the fields disappeared. Gone was the beautiful, peaceful scenery of farm life. It was replaced by a fog so dense that it had Hinata calling out for her teammates' names. She couldn't see anything. There was fog everywhere. Hinata stepped on something, a rock perhaps. When she bent down to pick it up, she wasn't able to see what was in her hands. She brought the item close to her face. It was a decomposed, rotting head. A deafening scream came out of Hinata's mouth as she threw the object out of her hand. Hinata, Kiba yelled, but he couldn't see a thing. God damn it, this isn't fun. I'd rather be picking up potatoes, Kiba yelled. As soon as those words left his mouth, Kurenai dispelled the genjutsu. She was satisfied that her little genins had changed their attitude towards picking up potatoes. She'll have to thank Anko for giving her such an idea of how to make her students take interest in things. The head, where did it go? Hinata asked. As she looked around, Shino walked forward and bent down to pick up a potato that clearly wasn't there before. Hinata, I think you pulled out a potato, but when you were under the illusion, you thought the potato was a head, Shino explained. No way, but it smelled so awful and it felt so real. Hinata mumbled. You're making me feel bad, Kurenai said. Anyways, get to work already. I'll be back when you guys are finished. Kiba and Hinata yelled in union. I thought you were helping us, sensei. Kiba said. I already did my share of work when I was your age, Kurenai replied. She then disappeared in a whirl of pink petals. This is better than that creepy illusion, Hinata commented. Agree, Shino said. Hinata Ino yelled at the top of her lungs. It was a shame that there were a few casualties as Shikamaru, Chuji and Asuma-sensei had been walking close behind her. Thus, when she yelled, their eardrums felt like it was going to explode if they hadn't covered their ears. Hinata turned around, and behind her was Kiba with Akamaru on his head, Shino, and Kurenai. She waited for Team 10 to catch up to them before she greeted Ino and her team properly. Hello, Hinata said while her eyes acknowledged everyone. When the genins exchanged greetings, no one seemed to notice Kurenai's downward gaze and shy smile, or Asuma's flirtatious look. Asuma, what is your team up to? Kurenai asked. We're working on improving our loudmouth slacker glutton formation. Hinata's head suddenly snapped towards Asuma. Team S10 sensei. It had been the first time Hinata found a voice to be so attractive. When Asuma's response rolled out of his tongue, his voice sounded smooth and raspy. Hinata had to stop her hands from raising to her chest as if clutching to her heart. Why did her first crush have to be so unobtainable? Damn it, Kurenai brought up her hand to her mouth to cover her giggle. You mean Ino Shika Cho sensei? Don't call us that in front of people, Ino said. Keep it up and you'll regret it. I'll hate you forever. Shikamaru rolled his eyes. He didn't really care about being called a slacker. Kurenai sensei, Hinata interrupted. How do you know Asuma-sensei, she asked. Oh yeah, Ino said in realization. I didn't know you two knew each other. In the next few moments, all eyes were on the two teachers as they waited to see who would respond to the question. Asuma Sarutobi was my teammate, Kurenai said. As a fond smile slipped through, that's awesome, Chuji commented between his eating sessions. Cause he's an awesome sensei. Asuma takes us out to eat even though he calls us name. Whoa, that is awesome, Kiba said. Just not the name part. Kiba turned to Kurenai with a wide smile. Kurenai-sensei, are you gonna take us out to eat too? Kurenai glared because of what he had started. Asuma merely chuckled. Hinata turned her attention towards the person who let out an awfully loud yawn. It was Shikamaru. Asuma laughed and placed his hand on the Nara's head. Guess we better get going, Asuma said. No, Hinata said in her head. She was going to miss his voice. Shikamaru Nara wasn't oblivious. In fact, he was quite perceptive. His experience derived from years and years of watching his classmates fawn over Sasuke Uchiha, so he was an expert at picking up fangirl behavior. He sighed in annoyance as his teacher walked up to him from behind to put a hand on his shoulder. You'll get it down before you know it, you'll see, Asuma said. Team 10 had just finished training, but there hadn't been as much progress. That's why Asuma had assumed that Shikamaru felt frustration over not seeing results right away. I know, Shikamaru replied. Asuma let his hand drop to the side and left to check on Ino and Chuji, who were panting on the ground. Ino was too exhausted to yell, and Chuji was too exhausted to eat. Shikamaru walked to a tree and sat down, his back resting against it for support. He observed the interaction between with his teacher and teammates. Asuma's deep, rich voice spoke a few words of encouragement before throwing his head back to laugh because of something Ino had said. The young Nara didn't really care that Hinata Hyuga had a crush on his sensei, but what bothered him was the possible fangirl behavior that would eventually follow. Was she crazy? Their teacher was like in his 30s. Asuma-sensei, can I ask you something? Shikamaru said as his teacher was approaching the spot he was at. How old are you anyways? Listen kid, to know why you're asking or what is it to you, but I'm old enough to be entrusted with your training, and with passing down the will of fire, Asuma said. Ugh, I'm not questioning your ability as a teacher, Shikamaru said. Asuma studied Shikamaru's expression before deciding that the young genin was telling the truth. I'm 27, Asuma said. So why do you ask? Shikamaru bit his lips. He was trying so hard not to laugh. So Asuma was 15 years old when Hinata was born. That was so rich and freaking hilarious. Asuma, you're old, Shikamaru said as he finally let a laugh escape out of him. What are you working on? Hinata Kurenai asked as she sat down next to her student. Hinata, and nothing, Hinata replied, while crumbling the paper she had been writing on and pushing it into her weapon pouch located on her thigh. Kurenai merely smiled. Was it a love letter? She asked. What? Of course not, Sensei, Hinata said as she looked down at the ground, shoulders slouched. Dejectedly, it's not a love letter, Hinata repeated, as withdrew the crumbled paper from her weapon pouch. She opened it and placed it on one of her thigh as she tried to straighten it. It's a clan thing, Hinata explained as she handed it to Kurenai. Kurenai's eyes widened upon reading the content of the page. Her crimson eyes shifted towards Hinata, while looking at the girl sympathetically. Hinata, I'll always be proud of you regardless of what path you choose in life, Kurenai said. But I have to admit I will be very amazed if you accomplish your dream to abolish the division and unite your clan. You're only 12 years old, but I think you're on the right path since you're beginning to construct an opening argument such as this, Kurenai said as she glanced back down to the content written on the paper. Why, you're not just saying that, Sensei, Hinata asked, her orbs filled with hope. Hey, have a little trust in me, okay? I'm also an idealist, Kurenai explained with a smile while handing back the paper to Hinata. The young genin gave a small smile. Thank you for believing in me, Sensei. Shino, Kiba and Akamaru finally arrived to the training grounds by then. The two male genin exchanged side glance with one another, feeling as though they had just missed something important. Kiba, I want you and Akamaru to team up against Hinata, while I work individually with Shino, Kurenai said while standing up from the bench. Alright, Sensei, Shino replied. We're not gonna go easy on you just because you're our teammate. Hinata, Kiba said, his voice laced with confidence. Thank you, Kiba. Hinata walked to the center of the training ground as she tied her mid-length hair with a hair tie. She adjusted her fishnet arm sleeve and pushed her left foot and left arm forward, shifting into the Hyuga fighting stance. Kiba also moved to the center of the training field. Thank you. I don't think you should be thankful, Hinata. Last night I finally got down one of my family's technique. Maybe you should ask me to take it. Easy on you, Kiba. Kurenai cut through, clearly frustrated. Stop talking and start fighting. Yes, sensei, Kiba growled out, clearly unhappy that his self-buff of moral was interrupted. It was just part of who he was. Kiba needed to say something awesome and threatening before a fight. But Kurenai-sensei just doesn't get it. Kiba, Hinata asked. She hadn't moved yet since she had been waiting for Kiba to take his fighting stance. Instead, he crouched down to the ground, while both hands stretched in front of him. He looked like he was trying to be a spider. No, not a spider, but a beast. For legs technique, Kiba chanted. Hinata watched in awe as his body got cloaked in blue chakra. Kiba's nails grew in size and took the appearance of claws. His teeth also grew in size as his wild brown eyes changed. Amazing, she said, feeling half excited and half scared. Her heart rate increased, and adrenaline rushed through her very being. Hinata had yet to learn any of her clan's secret techniques, so she was beginning to doubt herself at this point. But thoughts of doubt were forced out of her head once Kiba had closed the distance. His fist stopped inches away from her face, but he never connected the hit. The amount of force he had used had created a breeze which made Hinata's bangs move wildly as she stared at his blue chakra-laced fist. Kiba, why didn't you hit me? Because you can't fight me the way I am just yet, and it just wouldn't be fair for you. He explained. I was just showing off the new technique I learned. The technique he learned allowed his speed, reflexes, and instinct to increase. Hinata closed her fist on her side as she began to visibly shake, not due to anger, but frustration at her inability to keep up with her teammate. I don't care, she said. Let's do this again. Oi, you sure, Hinata? I might hurt you, Kiba said. Kurenai signaled a timeout with her spar with Shino so she could supervise the spar and intervene in cases too dangerous for Hinata. Shino followed Kurenai to the bench area and they eagerly awaited for the spar to start. After Kiba moved back to the place where he had started, he faced Hinata, with his heart filled with concern because he might really hurt his teammate. But who is he to decide what she can or can't handle? They've been on the team together for only 2 weeks after all. Go, Hinata said, commencing the battle. Kiba's south flight brought him close, yet again, to Hinata, but this time his fist connected to a substitution. That second of confusion is all it took for Hinata to sneak behind him, but that was a mistake on her part, because he had sniffed her out. He caught her fist with one hand and struck her stomach with his free hand, sending her tumbling. She groaned incoherently but was up right away. Kiba didn't give her time to fall back to her practiced stance as he dashed towards her, but luckily she was able to leap to the side, while evading his elbow which he had meant to connect to her stomach. His movements were smothering, never giving her the chance to fight back. Forgetting about Akamaru, Hinata stumbled over its body, something Akamaru had done on purpose to aid his partner in battle. The girl fell on the ground and evaded punch. She rolled away and was up on her feet in time to block his kick with both her hands, which had been aimed at her face. Kurenai-sensei, why aren't you stopping the fight? Shino asked. Believe it or not, Kiba is actually going easy on her, Kurenai said as she chuckled. That kid is sure full of contradictions. I don't understand why you say it like it's good thing, sensei, Shino said. Kiba going easy on her may be a bad thing, but at the same time, it shows that he is beginning to care for his teammate, Kurenai explained. Shino replied. They both turned back to the fight in front of them, in time to see Kiba end the fight with a kick which landed on Hinata's back. The Byakugan had deactivated on its own due to the shock of pain Hinata felt. Shit, Kiba said as he ran towards her. It wasn't the power behind the kick that had hurt her, it was the tree she had collided with that had done most of the damage. Hinata, I'm so sorry, Kiba said as he knelt beside her. Here, you can punch me on my face if you want, he said as he tilted his head. giving her access to one side of his face. Hinata sat up slowly, with a bruised smile on her face. "Kiba, what are you saying?" she said as she lifted her hand to his face. Instead of punching him, she pinched him. "Why you were going easy on me? I want to be so angry at you, but thank you for that." By then, Kurenai, Akamaru and Shino were also there by her side. "Give me room, boys. I'm going to heal her wounds a bit to the best of my abilities," Kurenai said as the two male genin, plus Akamaru, backed away from the two female. "You did great, Hinata. Don't let this defeat discourage you," she said as she moved behind Hinata and placed her glowing green healing hands on her back. "Thank you, sensei." As Hinata stood, she yelled in pain and fell back down. "Hinata, what's wrong?" Kurenai asked. "I don't know, I think I sprained my ankle," she explained. Hinata activated the Byakugan as if to confirm her theory. "Why yeah, I sprained my ankle, but the damage doesn't look that bad. It just feels bad." Kiba couldn't shake off the guilt of hurting his teammate, so he turned his back towards Hinata and crouched down. "Jump on Hinata, I'll carry you," Kiba said. "But Kiba, I am really heavy," Hinata explained. Team 8 didn't realize Team 10 had just finished training nearby, and were now approaching the area because Asuma wanted to see a certain woman. Hinata Ino's sing-song voice cut through, and Hinata immediately froze. Team 10 was approaching. "What cha doing on the ground?" Ino asked after Team 8 and Team 10 genins exchanged greetings. "I sprained my ankle and Kurenai-sensei can't heal this sort of injury." Hinata's words had actually been a jab at Kurenai's pride, but the shy girl didn't realize this. Asuma looked at his girlfriend. In a sympathetic way, there had been a time where Asuma sprained an ankle and Kurenai wasn't able to heal it. "That sucks," Chuji commented. "Are you going to the hospital? Maybe Asuma-sensei can carry you. He's super strong, so even if you're heavy, that's fine," Hinata said. Her hands went up to her face. As she started to blush, Ino thought Hinata's reaction was because she was embarrassed about possibly being called fat. Thus, Ino ended up elbowing Chuji on the side and calling him an idiot. Asuma ignored the young ones and walked forward and knelt in front of Hinata. "Where does it hurt?" he asked. Hinata just loved his raspy, sexy voice. She bit her lips, while shutting out her inner fangirl, beckoning her to just faint in his arms. "Asuma-sensei, it hurts everywhere," she almost wanted to say. Here," Hinata said. As she tried to move her injured ankle, his large hands were lightly pressed against the area which required healing. "Okay, this is gonna hurt a bit." Asuma's hand glowed green as he healed away her sprained ankle. "I had a few sprains over the years, so I was forced to learn self-healing technique. Those are much more difficult, by the way, than healing another person," he explained. Unnecessary, but the point of him talking was really to distract the young genin from her pain, and it seemed to be working because she was looking at him like he was the best shinobi in the world. Kids these days were so easily impressed. It was adorable. Shikamaru watched the scene silently, with his hands tucked inside his pockets. He sported an annoyed look on his face. He felt disgusted and at the same time, disappointment that Hinata had descended from an outlier as she fell within the standard deviation. She was just like all the other girls now, hopelessly lost. "Isn't Asuma-sensei the greatest?" Ino asked Kiba, as they were both watching Asuma heal Hinata. "I'm sure Kurenai-sensei can learn more advanced healing technique if she wanted," Kiba said. "Guys, this isn't a competition," Chuji said. Kurenai laughed while she listened to the young genins bantering about mundane things. She then focused on the man that had stolen her heart. Watching him heal Hinata just made her think of how great of a father he could one day become. Her heart fluttered at this thought. "Can you stand now?" Asuma asked Hinata. While backing away and taking his spot next to Kurenai, the young genin stood up slowly. While looking at the spot where Asuma's hand had just been, "It's like it never happened," Hinata mumbled, half confused and amazed at the power of chakra healing. "Thank you very much, Asuma-sensei," Hinata said as she bowed. Kurenai and Asuma exchanged knowing looks. It felt so great to be alive, and be able to teach kids that looked up to them as though they were some sort of hero. Meanwhile, Shikamaru just rolled his eyes. Truthfully, he just wanted to go already. But the reason he was still there because Asuma promised to take Team 10 out to a barbecue restaurant. Hinata lay on the grass, with her eyes closed, and a book opened on Chapter 7. Kurenai had been sent on some sort of mission, so Team 8 had a small break. It wasn't supposed to be a break, they were supposed to be training together. But Shino said he was going to take the opportunity to learn more about his clan's technique, since Kiba had recently learned the four-leg technique. Meanwhile, Kiba was also being trained by his family since he had yet to learn a move that incorporates Akamaru. As for Hinata, she had been using her free time to beat up inanimate targets with her gentle fist, and catching up on some of her clan history. But upon turning to Chapter 7, she had dozed off on the grass, by the riverbank. "Nah, are you alive?" A familiar voice awake her from a short lucid dream she was having. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked to her side to see Naruto looking down. "And Naruto." Hinata grabbed the book off her stomach and closed it. "How have you been?" The blonde took a seat next to her and brought his knees to his chest. "I've been bored. This genin thing is an overly hyped hoax. We're just being used as slave to work for civilians," he complained. "I want to go on a sea mission so badly, maybe an escort mission to some land I've never been to." "I know what you mean," Hinata replied, as her hands played with the book cover. The book cover had an interesting leather texture. It looked ancient, yet it smelled new. How has your team been treating you?" "Sasuke's still a bastard. Kakashi-sensei doesn't give a damn about my training, and Sakura's still the same, fawning over stupid Sasuke." Naruto's response left Hinata speechless. She hadn't realized how hard other teams had it. She had always assumed that all teachers were as nice as Kurenai and as awesome as Asuma, although she didn't know much about Naruto, his background or his likes and dislikes. One thing she remembered from the academy was that he enjoyed sparring and pulling pranks, but she wasn't about to suggest they go off and pull prank on people. "My sensei went off on a B rank mission," Hinata said, with pride. And if you don't mind, maybe we can train together." "Seriously, you're not pulling one on me, are you?" Naruto replied. "I promise I'm not deceiving you. I enjoy training." Hinata's words made Naruto go quiet for a bit, before he spoke again. "I wish we had been friends at the academy," Naruto said. "Sincerely, me too," Hinata replied. But to be honest, I was always kind of scared of boys," she admitted. "I used to get bullied a lot by them, until Ino came and stood up for me," she explained as she reached for her backpack and stored her book away. "Whoa, that's weird. It's like my mind is censoring the imagine since I can't picture Ino doing that at all," Naruto said. "I mean, I sort of do, but her face is a blur." He imagined a young girl with blonde hair coming to Hinata's rescue, but Ino's facial features were blurry. Even her mint blue eyes looked pixelated. Hinata giggled. Naruto's words had painted a picture inside her head which matched up with his imagination. Hinata, let us go to where my team trains," Naruto said as he stood up. "Oh, okay," Hinata said and followed him. The training ground was not much of one. It was just a large clearance in the middle of the forest, where the memorial stone for fallen heroes stood tall. There was no benches or wooden dummies, not even round posts for target practice. It made Hinata wonder why this place had been chosen by Kakashi. Not far from the memorial stone was 3 thick wooden poles stabbed onto the ground. Hinata walked up to the one at the center, and placed her hand on it. Her eyes trailed downward, where she noticed a decomposed rope. She examined it in confusion, as the Naruto came from behind her and laughed. "What's so funny?" she asked. "I was tied there once," Naruto replied, pervert, as if reading her thought. He went ahead and tried to defend himself. "Not in a weird way," Naruto explained. He went ahead and told her the story of the bell test Kakashi put them through, and how his team almost failed and went back to the academy. He then explained how he was tied up with a rope as he watched his classmates eat. After he had finished the story, Hinata dropped the rope as she had touched some sort of cursed object. "I can't believe any sensei would do that," she said. "Kurenai sensei didn't give us a test. We just started training right away," Hinata explained. Naruto further into the forest clearance until he picked a spot. He turned to Hinata and with a smile he said he was ready to train. "Hinata, taijutsu is not my strongest suit right now. "Can I use ninjutsu?" Naruto asked. Sure, that way. It would be even more fun," Hinata replied as she took her spot at a good distance across from him. "Great," Naruto said as he took out a weapon from his leg pouch. "When this kunai hits the grass, we'll start," he said. Okay. When the weapon stabbed the ground with a soft thud, Hinata activated the Byakugan as Naruto created 20 shadow clones. "What is this? There's so many," Hinata thought to herself. Clearly impressed at such feat, she noticed that she couldn't even tell them apart from the real on. "I can't back down now. I'm the one that suggested this." Hinata dashed forward, both hands ready for palm strikes. To her disappointment, several Naruto clumsily threw themselves in her way as though they wanted to be struck down by her. He wasn't kidding when he said taijutsu is not his strongest. But then again, how could it be? Naruto was an orphan and all his fighting got taught to him at the academy. It was such distracting thought that made her almost lose her footing as she clumsily dodged 3 shadow clones. "Alright, it's time to get serious." Naruto's battle cry gave his position away as the real one. Hinata fought her way through 5 more clones as she approached what she thought to be the original. She leaped into the air and came crashing in front of him, while thrusting her palm forward and striking him once on the shoulder. To her surprise, it disappeared with a puff sound, while the real one, who had never spoke so far, had summoned even more. Haha, one of them taunted her. She wasn't sure at this point whether it had been the actual Naruto. "Guess it's time to end this. Grab her, guys," another one yelled. Hinata was able to see all around her, and she counted over 20 shadow clones. Hinata leaped in the air in time to avoid Naruto coming out of the ground as though he was a fox or a badger. "I'm not going to let it end so easily," Hinata said. She was still in midair when she struck down each Naruto that tried to grab her or attack her. When she landed to catch her breath, she noticed a kunai by her leg. At the time, she hadn't though any of it, until she realized there should only been 1 kunai stabbed on the ground, not 2. "No!" she yelled, but it was too late. Her fear was realized when a kunai puffed and its place lay Naruto, holding onto her ankle. When she tried to kick her away out of his grasp, he didn't dissipate. Soon her surrounding darkened. The source of darkness came from the shadows that the 7 Naruto created as they came down from the sky and tackled her to the ground. Gacha came the muffled sound of the real Naruto as he spoke. He had also become the victim of his own plan as he felt the weight of his shadow clones on him and Hinata. He released her ankle and struggled to make the hand seal to release his shadow clones so that they could breathe again. "That was so fun," Naruto said as he sat up. The young kunoichi remained on her back, panting. "I can't believe I lost," Hinata mumbled. "Why, you beat me with numbers." She sat up abruptly, with her eyes looking wide. "Naruto?" "Yes," Naruto asked. "You actually strategized?" "I did." Hinata said as she nodded. "Yeah, I strategized," Naruto said, as he threw both of his hands into the air. "I never knew you were this amazing." Hinata's comment, and the honesty in her tone, made Naruto blush, more out of happiness for being acknowledged by a girl, than embarrassment. "Take that, you Sasuke jerk. Not everyone likes you," Naruto thought to himself. "Wait, does she?" he wondered. Hinata, what do you think of Sasuke?" he asked. Sasuke, I don't really know much about him, even if Ino used to talk about him all the time. So I don't know what to think of him." Hinata glanced at her legs and decided to dust off her gray shorts. She then looked back at Naruto. "Why did you ask me that?" she said. "I just wondered if you were part of his fan club. That's all." Oh, no I'm not," Hinata said. The 2 young genins parted ways and said their goodbyes. Naruto went home to his apartment, but today he didn't feel as depressed as he normally did. While Hinata arrived at her home, but felt more sad than she ever has. Kiba knew a new clan technique. Shino was in the process of learning one. She was obviously falling behind, and the proof of that was when Naruto beat her during their training. She doesn't have perfect defense. Hinata wanted to go up to her father and beg him to train her, but her courage diminished upon her encounter with him. He merely glanced down at her as he walked past her, and said nothing, while Hinata stood there, in the middle of the hallway, with her fist clutching. Is this how things will always be? Between her and her father, her face was bare, her long untamed dark hair was spread on a white fluffy pillow, and her slender frame was covered with white sheets. Kurenai glanced towards the man that she loved. and watched his movement as his tanned upper body got covered by a dark navy long-sleeved turtleneck ninja shirt. Asuma slowly walked towards his ninja headband, which had been thrown to the floor last night during their passionate encounter. As he had welcomed her back, he picked it up and fastened it on around his forehead. He turned to Kurina Yuhi and sat next to her on the bed. He let out a yawn which made her laugh. The man never seems to sleep well, or so he claims. What are your plans for the day, she asked. But what she was really asking was, will I be able to see you again today? Go home, I guess, shower, then get dressed and show up at Shikaku's doorsteps, he replied. His kid, Shikamaru, is the most unmotivated, laziest kid I've ever met, so I'm gonna have a talk with Shikaku and see if I could learn anything about his kid. But Shikamaru is your student, haven't you been able to learn about his likes and dislikes by now? Kurina asked. The little grunt loves to brush me off with sarcastic remarks and smartass comments, he replied. Sometimes I get the feeling he doesn't like me. How could that be possible? Kurina said and laughed, clearly amused by his situation. I dunno. Asuma leaned down and placed a kiss on her forehead before he said his goodbyes. Sometimes the hardest thing in life is parting from someone you love so much, but then again it could be that absence makes the heart grow fonder. When Shikaku Nara opened the gate's door to the mansion, only to see Asuma standing there, he knew it wasn't something good. He invited his son's teacher inside, and over tea and light snacks, he finally told Asuma to stop beating around the bush and to tell him if his son, Shikamaru, was in trouble or not. Yoshino definitely wasn't going to like this. Not in trouble, per se, Asuma said. He's just having a hard time opening up to me and being a team player. He ignores my instruction during training, and likes to go off on his own and take naps. Shikaku brought up a dumpling to his mouth, and chewed it slowly, while deep in thought. He then let out a sigh. That's most bothersome indeed, Shikaku commented. I don't understand why Shikamaru's behaving like a rebel. Ino and Chuji are his childhood friends. I would thought things would be going more smoothly. So what can I do for you, Asuma? Since I don't know much about Shikamaru, I was hoping you could tell me some of his likes, Asuma said. My son loves to play games, Shikaku said, as he recalled a time Shikamaru got in trouble when he helped Naruto pull a prank on Iruka-sensei. I'm thinking you can get him interested and motivated by offering him a reward he can't turn down, a few rounds of shogi, or a whole day off. A whole day off. Asuma rubbed his temple, clearly frustrated. The door to the guest room slid open and Shikamaru poked his head inside. I thought I heard Asuma's voice, Shikamaru said dryly, as he made a movement to walk away once his curiosity had been satisfied. Not so fast, Shikamaru, come back here, Shikaku called out. The young genin let out a groan as he strolled back inside the guest room and took a seat next to his father, on the tatami floor. What is it, Dad? He asked. Annoyed, Asuma dropped by to play a few rounds of shogi with you, Shikaku lied. Shikamaru's eyes widened as he turned to his teacher, with a suspicious look on his face. Why would you do that? Shikamaru asked Asuma. Because I'm your teacher, damn it, and I want to get to know my students better, Asuma replied. And it's Asuma-sensei to you, Shikamaru, Asuma grunted out. Shikaku made a motion to stand, as he said he had to go to work soon. He then turned to Shikamaru and asked him to take Asuma to the room where the shogi board was already set up, and then disappeared outside the guest room. For all the interest Asuma showed, Shikamaru merely looked uninterested. During their first turn, they both chose to move a pawn forward. It was the next turn that had Asuma raising an eyebrow in interest when Shikamaru moved an Iron General in front of an Iron King. Shikamaru had wanted to try out a strategy which he had been thinking of. Asuma paused to think, wishing the game was taking place at the porch so he could smoke. Oh, what the hell, it was too early in the game to be cautious. Maybe Shikamaru was just bluffing and didn't know what he was doing. So Asuma moved another pawn forward, prompting the young boy to scoff. Damn, maybe Shikamaru knew what he was doing, Asuma thought, as he watched the young genin move the Iron General with confidence, and placed it on the square behind the pawn which Shikamaru had moved on the first round. A grin appeared on Asuma's face, as he mirrored Shikamaru's tactic. No fair. Shikamaru's sudden outburst made Asuma throw his head back as he laughed. He had finally seen Shikamaru take an interest in something. And it was a good feeling to have witnessed this. 35 turns later, Asuma found himself backed into a corner. He pictured if this went down in real life, he would have been standing at the Hokage Tower, watching the village and everything around him crumbled, as an unknown enemy rushed in with his army to capture his friends and beloved one. No, this couldn't be. Asuma wasn't about to lose his empire to a 12-year-old genin. He had to believe in himself yet. Asuma lost on the next turn. Ha, Shikamaru said, quite arrogantly, and here I thought I wasn't good at all, but then again, the only adult I've ever faced was my father. His wins had me thinking I wasn't good, he said smugly. Guess I found something I'm better at than you, Asuma-sensei. Shikamaru couldn't wait to rub it on Hinata's face. Wait, why was he thinking this? Maybe because he wanted to peel away the layers and expose her to the fact that Asuma was human. Everyone had their strengths and weakness. Asuma rubbed the back of his head while feeling embarrassed over his loss. He was starting to believe that there was a hidden genius inside of the young genin. He had learned to play shogi from his father, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, and the third Hokage was able to go head-to-head in shogi with Shikaku Nara. Shikaku Nara was the best, while the third Hokage was the second best. Asuma had prided himself on being the third best thing in this whole village until now. There was still a possibility that Shikamaru's win had been some sort of fluke. Asuma would have to spend a whole afternoon observing Shikamaru in order to find out if he had any of Shikaku's wits. Well, Shikamaru, that was fun. I'll see you tomorrow at the training ground, Asuma said, while standing up. So you're running away? Shikamaru's question earned a glare from the older man. Of course I'm not running away. I just got other things to do, Asuma explained. But if I see improvement on your hand-to-hand combat by the end of this week, then I promise we'll spend a whole afternoon playing games. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered to himself. But whatever, I'll do it. Alright, that's the spirits, Asuma grinned. Asuma got to spend the rest of the day with Kurenai. It didn't matter that she was busy writing a mission report. He was at her apartment, keeping himself occupied with a book as sank back on the couch. He constantly peered over at her form. She was on a chair, in front of the dining table, looking ever so focused as her hand never stopped writing. He would interrupt her focus on purpose by sighing loudly, until eventually it forced her to take a break and keep him entertained. It was small moments like these he enjoyed, getting in each other's way from completing their work. Asuma did this on purpose because the third Hokage was his father, and he didn't like it when his father would send Kurenai on missions outside the village. Oh well, nothing he could do about that. Shikamaru had a tendency to lay anywhere he deemed appropriate, so he could watch the clouds or take a nap, which is why he shouldn't have been surprised to have been awoken up by a violent nudge to his ribcage, and the sound of a loud thud. He lazily opened his eyes, ready to scream at the person who woke him up, but his threat stayed inside his head as he saw Hinata awkwardly sprawled on the grass next to him. Hi Shikamaru, she greeted him, awkwardly. He silently watched her as he picked up 2 scattered books from the grass. How did you manage to not see my body and trip over me? He asked. It's not what happened at all, she said. When I saw you, I came to say hi, but I didn't know you were sleeping, she explained. But then this large caterpillar crawled on me and I got scared and lost my balance while trying to kick it off, and I accidentally kicked you too. And then I fell. Shikamaru laughed once he heard her story. Anyways, I'll leave you to your nap. Wouldn't want to waste more of your time? Shikamaru raised an eyebrow as Hinata said this, and he watched her retrieving form walking away. With a sigh, he got up and performed a hand seal with both of his hands. His shadow became distorted before it stretched into the shape of a line which snaked towards Hinata until it connected to her shadow. Troublesome. I know I've said those kind of things before, but that's because we were in the academy, and I really loved sleeping during lunch, he said. Shikamaru let go of her shadow and watched her turn to him with a small smile. Okay, Hinata replied. She didn't say anything about how he used to sleep in almost every class. Then I guess I'll join you, she said as she walked up to him and sat next to him. His eyes curiously drifted towards the books on her lap. Theory of Genjutsu and Chakra Manipulation. Shikamaru read out loud the name of the books. Is your team doing tree climbing exercise already? He asked. No, not yet, Hinata replied. Something about her posture told him that something was troubling her. I don't mean to make it my business or anything, but did something happen to you? He asked. I don't know. I went to visit Kurenai-sensei earlier and I got this feeling she didn't want me there. She gave me these books before basically kicking me out of her place, she said dejectedly. I know it's our day off, but I love spending time with sensei. Shikamaru didn't know what else to say. He didn't have all the information that he needed at hand, so he decided to play a game with her in order to get the information that he needed. Let us play something I like to call a memory game, why? Hinata asked. What a drag. Don't you know that as ninja we have to keep our mind sharp? This kind of mind exercise helps me find the answer to things, Shikamaru said, while rolling his eyes. So maybe we could find the answer you're looking for. But I never heard of such a game, Hinata said. So I don't know how to play it. Just close your eyes and try your best to answer my questions, Shikamaru explained. Oh, okay, she said as she placed the books to her side and lay on her back. The last thing she saw was the blue sky before she closed her eyes. I'm ready, she said. When you went to Kurenai's house, what was the color of the door of her apartment? He asked. Hinata tried hard to recall a memory that had happened half an hour ago, but couldn't. I don't remember, she replied. Then take a guess. I think it was burgundy, Hinata said. When you stood at the entryway to take off your shoes, what did you see? I saw her black shoes, I guess, Hinata said. Then I took off my shoes and I placed it next to some large blue ninja shoes. But you just said her shoes were black, Shikamaru pointed out. I know, but now I remember that there were two pairs of shoes, Hinata said. Interesting. When you entered her apartment, what did you see or smell? Shikamaru asked. I smelled tea mostly. Then I followed her to the living room, and there were 2 cups of tea prepared. How did she know I was coming? Troublesome. I'm the one asking the question here, Shikamaru said. Did Kurenai-sensei offered you tea? She did, Hinata replied. Wait, I smelled something else, she said. I'm sure it was the scent of cigarettes, which is also strange, since sensei doesn't smoke. Shikamaru knew someone else who smokes, Asuma-sensei. Next question. Describe the event that led to Kurenai giving you 2 books to study, Shikamaru said. Easy, Hinata giggled. Kurenai-sensei trapped me in a genjutsu, a rather silly one that I couldn't break out of. So she gave me those books and said that I needed to study them because we were going to start our tree climbing exercise. She sighed. After that, we're going to learn how to break out of a genjutsu. What did you see in the genjutsu? Shikamaru asked. Everything was normal. The only thing that was strange was that Kurenai-sensei was wearing her dress inside out, Hinata replied. Shikamaru's cheeks turned a slight shade of red as he reconstructed the whole scenario inside his head. Kurenai-sensei didn't trap Hinata inside a genjutsu. What probably happened was that she lacked clothes and threw on the dress in a hurry to answer the door. Kurenai definitely had a man inside her house during the time Hinata went to visit her, and the reason why she was in a rush to get Hinata out of her apartment was because she didn't want Hinata finding out that she had a boyfriend, or perhaps Kurenai-sensei simply wanted to return to whatever activity she was doing. Ugh, troublesome. He shouldn't have played this game. Shikamaru, how do I win this game? Hinata asked, as she finally opened her eyes. Sorry to say this, Hinata, but you lost because you couldn't piece together all the evidence presented to you, Shikamaru explained as he watched her pout. And yes, you were right, Kurenai-sensei didn't want you there. What you mean you figured it out? Then tell me why sensei didn't want me there. Was it me explaining this to you is so tiresome? I'm definitely going to take a nap after this, Shikamaru said while he yawned. The reason Kurenai-sensei didn't want you at her apartment was because her boyfriend was waiting for her inside her room. The smell of cigarettes was probably because her boyfriend smokes. Hinata's face completed turned red. I forgot that sensei has her own life. She could just told me. Shikamaru scoffed as he heard this. We're kids, Hinata. Adults feel like they don't owe us an explanation, Shikamaru explained. After all, their private lives is none of our business. She had to agree with him, being true to his words. Shikamaru lay back down on the grass with the intention of taking a nap, hoping to have an advantage over her teammates. Hinata opened the book about chakra manipulation and reviewed it. An hour went by when Shikamaru woke up from his nap, but his eyes remained closed. He was enjoying the sound of the grass whispering and the birds singing. He was used to these sounds of nature, but the only thing that had been different that day was the sound of Hinata flipping through pages. Shikamaru opened his eyes once the sound of pages ceased. He peered over at her from his position and saw her eyebrows furrowed. It almost looked like she was glaring at the book. "Let me guess, you got to the hard part," Shikamaru said. Feeling like she couldn't lie to him, Hinata sighed a response. "Theories are difficult for me to understand. I can't really picture what the book is saying," she said. "Of course you can't. The book was clearly written by an expert who forgot what it's like to be a genin." His response actually made Hinata feel better. She watched the boy next to her sit up and scooped closer to her. He then leaned over to read the book she was holding. "Ah, this is actually pretty in-depth and easy to follow," he said. "No way you actually get it," Hinata, as she breathed out a sigh. It was obvious that she felt unintelligent and discouraged. When he chuckled, his movement brought attention to their shoulders, which were touching. He wasn't used to physical contact with the opposite sex, so the situation gave rise to a feeling of discomfort as his cheeks felt hot. Eventually, he found a solution to his discomfort, so he stole the book from her hands and moved away, far enough so that their shoulders weren't touching. Shikamaru went on to explain, to the best of his abilities, what each variable meant. He used childish allegories so that she could understand. It worked, to his surprise. After he flipped to the next page to read the next paragraph, it was Hinata that scooped over so that she could get a better view of the book. The brushing of their shoulder distracted him, but not enough for him to not comprehend the content of the next page. "This part is such a pain to explain," Shikamaru complained. "I would need a writing board to show you what the book is saying." Hinata frowned. I guess we can stop here," Hinata said. "Well, thank you for everything," Shikamaru, Hinata said, as she got up and stretched. "You can't be too naive to think that I helped you out of the kindness of my heart," Shikamaru said, as he scoffed. "I know, I was hoping you didn't want anything in return," Hinata mumbled, disappointed over his words. "So what is it that you need me to do?" she asked. "Hinata, how good are you in taijutsu? I'm supposed to get better on hand-to-hand combat before the end of the week." Her smile was all the response he needed. Asuma Sarutobi could see Shikamaru was growing restless. As they neared the Hokage Tower to hand in the cat, along with a verbal confirmation that their mission was a success, it was after Team 10 received their pay that Asuma decided to say something, only that he didn't have to, because as soon as Asuma's brown eyes shifted to the young genin, the boy merely grunted. "What?" Shikamaru asked. "Come on, you can't be that mad about our mission, kid." Asuma knew that his tone of voice, which had portrayed amusement, wasn't gonna help his case. Chuji looked concerned as he stuffed his face with chips. "Sensei, I feel just as angry as Shikamaru. We almost wasted our whole day chasing that damn cat," Ino said as she took out a mirror and inspected her face. "If that thing had lay its claw on my beautiful face, I might murder it for sure." "You guys weren't the only one suffering. I had to skip a meal because of the feudal lord's wife and her evil cat," Chuji said. "Of course only a glutton would say something like that," Asuma said bluntly. His attention then shifted to where Shikamaru had only been a few moments ago. "Where did Slacker go?" As if answering his question, Ino pointed towards some direction. "I think that's him, Sensei," Ino said. Asuma followed the trajectory of her finger, which landed at some faraway rooftop of a house. Asuma chuckled. "He couldn't wait to get away from us," he muttered to himself, as he watched Shikamaru's disappearing figure. Shikamaru knew immediately that his lateness caused a diversion in plans. He knew this because when he arrived at Team 8 training ground, he found Sakura with Hinata. "Great, it's Pinky," he thought to himself. "I only have that evil plotting cat to blame." Shikamaru didn't take too kindly with Sakura being there, the last day at the academy. Along with Sakura's rude behavior towards Naruto was still fresh in his head. God knows that only a traumatic experience would change her for the best. He was hoping for that, even though it was probably a bad thing to hope for someone. Shikamaru, you actually came, Hinata said. She sounded surprised that he actually showed up instead of falling asleep God knows where. Hello Shikamaru, Sakura said. The sound of her calm voice, and the way her polite words rolled off her tongue made Shikamaru do a double take to make sure it was actually Sakura. How strange, it's such a drag to be late, when I'm the one that asked you to spar with me, Shikamaru said. I understand things happen, but Sakura kept me company. Hinata, you gotta stop being so nice. Ask him what happened. He's like an hour late, Sakura said as she crossed her arms and glared at the lazy boy. It's a troublesome story. You wouldn't even believe it if I told you. There was this cat. Shikamaru was immediately interrupted by Sakura. No, not this excuse, Sakura said. Do you and Kakashi-sensei go to the same bookstore and buy the same book on excuses? And the rest the Sakura I know, Shikamaru thought dryly. Wait Sakura, I actually want to hear it. He did say I might not believe it, so it sounds interesting, Hinata said. Both girls turned their attention back to him. Shikamaru took in a deep breath before he recounted the story of how the feudal lord has a fat wife who owns an evil cat, but he was interrupted by both Hinata and Sakura. I know that cat, Hinata said. Been there, done that too, Sakura said. Ugh, so now you believe me, he asked. The two girls laughed at him, sympathetically. Sorry we doubted you, Sakura said, which he found strange because she doesn't really apologize. What happened to you? Shikamaru asked. What do you mean? Sakura's automatic response hinted that she didn't want to talk about it. He wasn't going to push the subject since it wasn't any of his business anyways. Sakura, you can tell him, Hinata said. Actually I think I should go, Sakura replied. Thanks for the talk, Hinata. Sakura then turned to Shikamaru and waved at him as she ran away from the training ground. You're very perceptive, Hinata commented, in a thoughtful manner. Why, you don't really know Sakura? Why, yet you could see something was off about her. I don't always watch the clouds. I also like to read. He also liked to read people, that is. So what did happen? He asked. Team 7 went on a mission. It was supposed to be a C rank mission which turned into an A rank. Sakura and her team almost died. I feel bad for her. I know she actually wanted to talk to Ino, and not me. What can you expect in this line of work? Not everyone makes it back home, Shikamaru replied. It's good she was exposed to that. Experiences like that are supposed to build character, so I heard. If she wanted a normal life, she should stay a civilian. Who was he kidding? He was the one that should stay a civilian. It's not like his folks couldn't just try to give him a sibling and have that sibling become a ninja. Instead of him, life can be such a drag, but not in suicidal way. I want to disagree with you, but I can't, Hinata said with a sigh, then turned to face him. Would you like something to eat before we start? She asked. He was about to decline the offer, but his stomach sent him a signal that he was really hungry, thus he accepted, feeling betrayed by his needs. All throughout their small picnic on the grass, he had watched her suspiciously. Hinata had packed enough food to feed herself and another adult. He wondered if the portion he was eating was supposed to be, in her mind, for Asuma-sensei, but he would never dare to ask her that. Hinata had admitted that he was perceptive, so why couldn't she see that he knew her secret? So how is it? She asked. After they were finished eating lunch, Shikamaru could see the hope in her eyes as she waited for a response. Almost as good as my mom's, he said. Shikamaru almost patted himself on the back after he saw his answer had made her genuinely smile. Shikamaru tried to make one of his rare contribution when he offered to help her clean up. He had been tasked with the disposal of garbage. Upon his return from his trip to the trash bin, he watched Hinata bend slightly by the bench, to unclasp the weapon pouch on her leg, to leave it on the sitting area. She then adjusted her black stocking, which had rolled down earlier on its own. All this ninja stuff and running around had her losing a bit of weight. When she straightened and turned to Shikamaru, she tucked her hair behind her ear and tilted her head in confusion. He knew what that look is for, so felt like an idiot for openly staring at her. The heat he felt rising on his cheeks was an indicator that he was probably blushing. Ugh, I'm leaving my weapons because we're only training hand to hand, she explained. Shikamaru recalled the memory game they played. And if anything, that game revealed to him that Hinata could be sort of oblivious. He was certain that he could stare at her all he wants and she wouldn't think it means anything. Not to say that he wanted to stare, but he was simply pocketing this information to avoid his cheeks from turning red in the future in the event he gets caught staring at her again. It was such a drag. Shikamaru was a man first, ninja second. He was well aware of the changes he was going through both physically and mentally, so he didn't attribute his curiosity to anything other than hormonal changes. In other words, he knew he didn't have a crush on her. Hinata was just pretty. He had been groaning all kinds of complaints under his breath as they walked to the center of the training ground to spar. "I want to be sleeping right now," he said. "But since I want to spend a whole afternoon playing games with Asuma-sensei, I need to show improvement by the end of the week." Why you're spending time with Asuma-sensei?" Hinata's reaction made him smirk. He gave her a smug look, because he knew about her crush, which is why he decided to say that in the first place. "That's right," Shikamaru said, confidently, "so let us get this over with." Hinata reached him relatively fast, and struck her palms forward, in successions. Shikamaru had switched from attack to defense, a habit of his, in order to study her before he thought of striking back. She was notably faster, but he had more strength. He managed to hold his defense, only just barely, as his smug expression vanished, replaced by a serious one. Shikamaru leaped away, and recalled the pattern in her movements. Perhaps it had been too soon on his part to establish a pattern, but he went ahead with his gut and welcomed her with his own attack as she closed the distance once more. She fell on one knee in time to dodge his kick, and swept across his feet with such speed that left him on his back, with the grass tickling the back of his neck. Hinata stood up and lifted one leg, while bringing down her heel to attack him while he was on the ground, but she paused inches before her attack connected to his stomach. When she noticed he had simply given up and closed his eyes as if to take a nap, "Shikamaru?" she asked. But what she didn't notice was that he had switched his strategy at the last minute. Hinata was obviously more impressive than him, so he wanted to know what she would do against unpredictability. "You can't be giving up while you don't know how lucky you even are," she mumbled, her mind drifting to the deal Shikamaru had with Asuma-sensei. To her surprise, he directed a low strike at her legs, powerful enough to throw her out of balance, but she recovered, and by then Shikamaru had already jumped on his feet, and soaked up every strike she threw. Eventually she leaped back as if wondering why he didn't look like he was in pain. Hell, it hurt a lot, but at least he had given the illusion that her punches were weak. Such doubt would surely have her making mistakes. He had gained the upper hand. When she had switched from attack to defense, his blows, though slower, had been more powerful than hers, so Hinata knew she couldn't block forever, because her arms were starting to hurt. Each step he took forward was 2 steps she stumbled backwards. On his last hit, she lost her balance and fell on her back. She maneuvered her body in midair so that the fall would be more smoothly and less painful. "Break," she mumbled from the ground, while panting. Upon hearing those magical words, Shikamaru also dropped. Out of exhaustion, their heads were next to each other, facing the sky, even though their bodies were on opposite directions, one of them north while the other was south. "You know," she began, as if she was in the process of choosing her words, "I trained hard today, so you didn't catch me at my best. I was already tired by the time you got here," she explained. "You should own up to your loss. When you're outside those gates, the enemy isn't going to say sorry right before he kills you," Shikamaru said dryly while his eyes followed a passing cloud. Shikamaru. The tone of both warning and embarrassment was present in her voice. He closed his eyes and smiled. "And I thought I was a downer," Hinata commented to herself. When she didn't hear anything from him for the next few minutes, she figured Shikamaru had fallen asleep. Not being one for staying idled for too long, Hinata stood up and got back to training on her own. Her family's gentle fist still didn't feel as natural as it should. When she explained this to Hanabi one day, her younger sister had only looked at her in confusion. Moments like those made her feel like a failure. Her soft grunts were louder than the sound of tree rustling and cicadas. Her volume had increased in time. Shikamaru woke up to the sounds of her struggles. and he turned on his side in time to witness her jump and throw a vicious kick in midair. He groaned and looked away, because he didn't understand why everyone around him tried so hard and seemed so determined, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. All he has ever known were his feelings of not wanting to do much in life, so in his point of view, it was everybody else that was insanely fueled with an overabundance of energy. It was just not normal. Looking at her made him feel tired, but he was actually tired because today he had put in the extra hour of training. For the first time since he began this genin thing, the grunting and soft sounds of footsteps had stopped, and he turned on his side only to jerk away like a cat that doesn't want to be handled by a human. Hinata was there, crouched down, but still staring down at him nevertheless. How did she cover that much distance without making a sound? I scared you, she asked, while tilting her head. Troublesome, he said while getting up on his feet. Tomorrow. Same time. He was now the one looking down at her. Even though she had gotten up again, she was still relatively shorter. He watched her retrieve her weapon pouch and ninja bag before joining him again. The two exited Team 8 training grounds. Once they reached the perimeter, they parted with waves and goodbyes. That same day, Asuma, curious as to why Shikamaru had ran off to in such a rush, decided to find out. He visited his father, and asked him to look for his student in his crystal ball, to see what he was up to. Hinata Hyuga, said a male raspy voice as he stood next to the Lord Third Hokage, his father. Her gentle fist form is pathetic and sloppy for her age. She is supposed to be 71% better than this, Asuma commented after they witnessed the spar between Shikamaru and Hinata. Shikamaru isn't all that good, yet she still lost to him. Asuma, we both saw how your student never rushed to fight. He studied her first before making a decision of how to defeat her. Hiruzen, the third Hokage said. But this spar has brought me most concern over the future of their generation. I suppose I will send word to Hayashi demanding him to explain himself. He is supposed to be raising his daughters to be exceptional, even if only one has an easier affinity to gentle fist. The village needs every clan's heirs and heiresses to be at their best. There you go again, father, trying to get involved, Asuma commented dryly. It's because of you that I don't get involved in things unless it's necessary. You don't think it's necessary? All I'm saying is that is too soon, Asuma said. And I have a feeling it will only get worse if you tell Hayashi how to raise Hinata, Hokage or not. Asuma walked to the window, which gave him a good view of the village. He tapped his pack of cigarettes, placed it in his mouth and lit it up. He took a drag and released the smoke while looking towards the direction of Karina's apartment. He then turned to his father, while the cigarette was in his hand. Don't do anything about the situation yet, father, Asuma warned him before he exited the Hokage's office through a window. Hiruzen merely shook his head and reached for an ink pen and a scroll. The Hokage, damn it, he's not gonna listen to his son that thinks he got life figured out just because he is a full-grown adult. The third Hokage began to write a message addressed to none other than Hayashi Hyuga. He loved his village too much not to get involved. It wasn't like Hinata had made any promises or anything, but Shikamaru still felt disappointed. He stood before a Hyuga, who was tall and had a mark on his forehead, and listened as the Hyuga adult explained that Lady Hinata sent him on her behalf. She couldn't make it to training because her clan duties got in the way, and as an apology, the Hyuga adult was to act in her place as his sparring partner. No thanks, Shikamaru said. Is there a message you'll like for me to relay to Lady Hinata? The Hyuga asked. You can start off by telling her, troublesome, Shikamaru said, and that I have Asuma-sensei who is probably itching to train me. He hoped those words would bring a blush to her face as she heard the message out loud. Shikamaru watched the Hyuga take out a scroll and write the message down. Would that be all? The Hyuga asked. Yeah, Shikamaru said. After the Hyuga disappeared in a swirl of leaf, he shoved his hands inside his pockets and groaned. Great, he had walked all this way for nothing. From the corner of his eyes, he caught a head full of pink hair. Sakura, perhaps his trip doesn't have to go to waste. Oi, Sakura, Shikamaru called out. Hinata's not here today. Shikamaru rolled his eyes when she looked surprised that he knew who she was looking for. Don't you hate it When you go somewhere to find a person, and they are not there like they normally are, Sakura asked him as she walked up to him. Tell me about it. It's also a pain in the ass when you make plans with a person and they send someone else to cancel, he replied. But since I hate wasting my time, I thought to ask you to take her place. How don't you hate me? That's too much of a heavy feeling for me to burden, he said with a smirk on his face. Alrighty then, suit yourself, but I'm going to pummel you to the ground, since Naruto made me so angry and I've been looking for a way to feel better. Yeah, through violence of course, he said, while rolling his eyes. Substitutions are allowed, Sakura said. Then you're going to be in for a headache. Shikamaru learned something that day. Underneath her skinny form, Sakura Haruno had monstrous strength. Yesterday's strategy did not work. Shikamaru had thought it would be a good idea to take a hit or two, to give the illusion that her hits didn't hurt. But what ended up happening was that he was sent rolling away like a ball. What the hell, woman, he asked, almost accusingly, as he got up. Told ya, pummel you to the ground, Sakura said. An hour later, Sakura came out as the victor. She walked over to Shikamaru and knelt next to him and asked if he was okay. I think I broke a rib, he said honestly. What, haha, you're so funny, Shikamaru, she replied while punching him playfully on the shoulder. Oh no, Sakura, really, you broke one of my ribs, he said. Oh my god, I'm so sorry, she apologized. Here, I'll help you get to a hospital. Thanks, Shikamaru said as he sat up while feeling excruciating amount of pain. Sakura knelt next to him and waited for him to throw his hand around her shoulder as she situated her around his waist. She helped him get up and they exited Team 8 training grounds. Wait, I got a better idea since it's closer. I know where Asuma-sensei lives, Shikamaru said. When they arrived at Asuma's apartment complex, Sakura knocked on the door in a way that if she had put any more force, Shikamaru believed she would have broken the door. Asuma-sensei, Sakura called out. Who is it? Came a female voice from the other side. Shikamaru froze, and couldn't speak. He knew that voice, it was Kurenai-sensei. He thought back to the memory game he played with Hinata, and one of the clue was Kurenai's boyfriend Smokes. No way. When Shikamaru didn't answer, Sakura decided to answer for him. It's Sakura. Haruno Kakashi's student. I got Shikamaru with me and he's hurt, Sakura explained while trying her best not to feel weirded out by having Shikamaru's shoulder around her. The door immediately flew open, as Kurenai urgently called over her shoulder to Asuma. The large adult male took Shikamaru in his arms and set him down on his couch. Asuma glared down at Shikamaru. Before he told him he should be known better than to train recklessly without an adult supervising him. Sakura, she's a monster, Shikamaru explained, while Asuma lifted up his shirt to heal his young student. Hey, it's not my fault you're squishy, she retorted. Whatever, kid. Just be more careful, Asuma said as he grunted, displeased. So Asuma-sensei, Shikamaru said, in between sounds of pain, you and Kurenai-sensei. Sakura's cheek turned pink as she looked between the two adults. You're too smart for your own good, slacker, his teacher said while grinning. Meanwhile, Kurenai was sitting on a chair, while watching the two in silence, with a small smile on her face. What, no way, Sakura said. Can't wait to tell Ino this, Sakura said excitedly, but then her smile fell when she remembered her friendship with Ino is still not that great. And I can't wait to tell Hinata too, she added. No, Shikamaru said. Asuma thought his outburst had to do with the pain he was feeling as he was being healed. There's a reason adults are secretive about their relationships, Sakura, so you shouldn't go around babbling to everyone you know, Shikamaru explained. Actually, Asuma didn't really care if his students found out, since Kurenai and him weren't hiding it in the first place. But Asuma chuckled and said nothing. Fine, Sakura said as she gave in. The two genins exited Asuma's apartment in silence, and before they parted, Sakura said something that surprised him. Thank you, Shikamaru. Lately I've been trying to get stronger, for myself, and for my friends. He said. I'm not coming anywhere near you when you're angry, he said jokingly. Shikamaru decided Sakura was a decent person once you peel her away from Naruto and Sasuke. He wasn't sure if that was a good thing, or a bad thing. Hinata had been taken away from Team 8 for 2 weeks after Hayashi received an insulting letter from Lord 3rd Hokage questioning his ability as a clan leader. Still, Hayashi didn't train his older daughter personally just yet. He allowed Hinata to watch the matches between Hanabi and himself, and assigned Niji to train with her. During his free time, because Kohyuga was gone on a mission, Kohyuga was assigned to protect Hinata after the event of her kidnap had taken place. Since Hayashi saw how soft Ko was towards Hinata, he thought the man would be ideal to oversee her training. Hinata felt displeased that her father would take Niji away from what little freedom he had with his time. She could feel Niji's hatred towards her and the main branch family. It was almost palpable, and if she could see this, Hinata was sure her father could see it as well, hence the reason why Hinata was overly displeased about the situation. It had been unclear to her as to how she ended up being trained by her family. Hayashi never left Niji alone with his daughter. He would supervise every match. In the event Niji's hatred consumed him to the point of hurting her severely. The worst injury a shinobi could receive is an injury that rendered them useless as a ninja, thus ending their careers. Some have committed suicide over this. So while Hayashi remained stoic on the outside, he was on edge. The Hokage was slamming him from one side, while the elders were pestering from another side. But nothing was worse than the demon-sized guilt he carried inside. His actions towards Hinata had been a projection of himself as a failure as a husband, an older brother. His wife died giving birth to Hanabi, and it had been his fault because he listened to the elders and didn't allow the Leaf Village's best medic to oversee the delicate C-section operation. Our medics are just as proficient, they said, and we don't have the funds to overpay Lady Tsunade. That gambling drunk excuse of a kunoichi, and his twin brother, Hisashi, believed that he had been making his own choice to die, when in reality he had been manipulated into it. Hayashi believed he deserved Niji's hatred. Over the duration of each practice, Hayashi would speak in a robotic manner, telling her areas she needed improvement in. Hinata, stop retracting and don't let Niji overpower you, Hayashi commented. Push forward, and block, and stop cowering. You're making the gentle fist look disgraceful. During practice, Niji sneered at her openly and scolded her, under his breath, with verbal abuse. There were many variations of words he used which all implied that she was weakest Hyuga, and that she should just quit the life of a shinobi. After her defeats, Hinata retrieved inside her mind a sunny place. It was a place where the sounds of birds chirping and wind blowing were noiseless, a place where Ino stood, with feet submerged in shallow river water which didn't make a sound. Ino held a clover in her hand, mint blue eyes smiling along with her expression of happiness. In this place, she replayed Ino's words she once said after she came and rescued Hinata from the bullies. I heard your name is Hinata Hyuga. I'm a clover bush, and my friend is a cherry blossom. Flowers needs a sunny place. No, not just flowers. Every ninja needs a sunny place because without it their hearts will get really cold and sad. Ino, ever the confident, was there anything enough to break her? Probably not. Any mean comments aimed towards her, she shrugs it off, before turning the insult back to the verbal abuser. But Hinata wasn't to Ino, and if she was, maybe Hinata would say to Niji she pitied him for all the anger and hatred he felt, that by the times he dies, he would already be dead and rotten inside. But that's only if she were Ino. Hinata had learned to accept her role. If she were persistent enough, maybe she could become Niji's South sunny place. Before dinner, Hinata would pay a scheduled visit to the medic ward located inside the main branch mansion. She'll stand inside a room, reserved for patients, and would unwrap the bandages around her arms, legs, and chest. The medic was a female, and Hinata stood, almost bare, and allow for the Hyuga medic to heal her injuries and bruises so that it doesn't scar. It was a feat provided only to main branch member to maintain the appearance of perfect and superior bodies. Dinner with her family was like having snacks at a funeral, all dressed in dark Hyuga training robes, taking small bites, chewing slowly, while looking distant or thoughtful. One night, Hanabi was being very talkative. She told her father that when she becomes the clan's leader, she'll obliterate the division between the main branch and lower branch, and unite them by allowing marriage between the two divisions. Hayashi almost choked on his food, and his head snapped towards Hanabi's direction, wondering where she even got that idea from. No doubt from her oldest sister. "I think I'm finished with my food," Hinata said. Although she had barely touched it, another reason why she had been unintentionally losing weight. "You may not be excused. Come back and listen to this," Hayashi said at her retrieving form. His oldest daughter paused on her steps and turned to her. "Father, what is true strength if you train a lot? Why aren't you progressing? Should you quit? Or will you keep going? Father, what are you saying? Are you asking big sis to quit?" Hanabi yelled, with the same vacant expression she shows when she's south inside her sunny place. She said, "I'll keep chi going because every ninja needs a sunny place. Without it their hearts will get really cold." Big sis Hanabi didn't know what to say. Her admiration for Hinata only grew. Hanabi felt astonished over her words. "Don't worry, I'll be the fireworks that will display on the day we accomplish your dreams," Hanabi said, also using her name as reference. Since the name Hanabi translated to fireworks, Hayashi was not very responsive to the desires and needs of his daughters, just like the elders were to him, which is why he decided to be more mindful. He was giving Hinata the option to quit. He no longer wanted to push her to pursue this ninja life if she didn't want to, but he was pleased with her choice. He turned back to his dinner. Quite frankly, he wanted to cry. His wife had named Hinata, and he never realized that such name would have an impact on their oldest daughter. Hinata was just Hinata. He never attributed any image to it. He wasn't a good father, and wouldn't become a better one overnight. He still felt hatred towards himself, disgust, frustration, but he'll be more careful from now on, not to slip. Praises were deprived from him at such a young age, and it felt so foreign to praise another, but he'll try harder not to scorn at her. It was in his nature to want to control everything. Hinata lay back on her bed, wondering if she had been too quick to decide if she wanted to continue this life. But if she were to quit, she'll be letting her sister down, and her sister was going to keep going, and Hinata knew she needed to be by her side. But Hinata was scared. Up until now she had been doing anything she needed to get stronger, but her father brought to her attention that she wasn't getting any better, but she wasn't going to give up after all. It was a land of wars, hatred and demons, and Hanabi was a girl who grew up in a garden shrouded with toxic souls. She needed a beacon. She'll be that sunny beacon in her little sister's life. Putting that aside, she will have to have a talk with her. Hanabi needed to stop going through her stuff while she wasn't home. It must have been how Hanabi found out about Hinata's dream, since Hinata had messy drafts written on different places inside her diary. "I'm overtraining, but not in a way that gets me results," Hinata mused. "What is strength and how can I measure it?" She was gentle, cautious and uncertain, traits which she shared with Kurenai, who happened to be the best at genjutsu. So those traits didn't hinder Kurenai from becoming strong, so that perhaps wasn't an indicator to why Hinata was so weak. "Am I genetically defected, born to be weak?" Niji would go on and on about destiny. He almost had her believing in it too, but then if she was defected, why was she able to activate her dormant Byakugan? Hinata got changed in the dark. She wrapped bandages around her arms and legs and chest. She slipped on dark pants and a dark shirt. Teammate was training without her on chakra manipulation, and she promised Kurenai that she wouldn't fall behind. True strength, Hinata figured, could be a compilation of things, not just the gentle fist. After grabbing her ninja bag, she shoved a flashlight and a book inside and slipped outside through her window. Ko Hyuga had just finished giving Hayashi a verbal affirmation that the mission was a success. Before he left the main branch mansion, he activated his Byakugan to make sure the young girl was safely tucked in bed. But what he saw was her trying to sneak outside. Much to his relief, she wasn't out this late trying to meet up with a boy. That is how he ended up shadowing Hinata. He knew how far and wide her Byakugan's range was, and allowed himself to get caught within her range on purpose. Ko Hinata was weary. She feared he was there to take her back home. She was at the outskirt of the forest which belongs to the Hyuga family, similar how the Nara had their own land. "Lady Hinata, let me assist you in training," he said as he walked forward, with his Byakugan deactivated. beat, but you just got back. You should go home and rest," Hinata said, while she pulled out a book and a flashlight from her bag as she stood by a tall tree. "My job is to protect you. If something were to happen to you," Ko didn't finish his sentence, because the words already hinted at a dark consequence. He extended his hand and she silently handed over her materials to him. Ko sat on the grass, with the flashlight aimed at the pages of the book in his hands. He read the content on the book, since he himself had forgotten how to even explain to a genin how to just walk on a tree. It came natural to him now, to the point he forgot that he wasn't born with the ability. Walking on tree was like walking on land. He was such an expert that his mind didn't require much thought, as his body just performed the action. "Climbing trees feels like a gravitational pull happening between my feet and the tree," Ko explained while shutting the book close, because putting it in his own words was better than using all kinds of confusing jargon. He sighed when he saw the confusion in her eyes. "It works the same way like a magnet. You're a genin, with genin level chakra reserves. Use your eyes to see how much chakra you're putting on your feet." He didn't tell her that too much chakra will repel her away from the tree, and that is exactly what happened when she tried. "Am I using too much?" Hinata asked, as she remembered Shikamaru explaining something to her about finding the right ratio pertaining to her body and chakra. "Yes, try again," he commanded, an authority he used because he was currently acting as her teacher. The same outcome kept happening, until hours later Hinata found the right amount to stand against the tree trunk. "Ko, I did it," Hinata said excitedly. "We're Hyugas. This exercise comes easy to us." Ko should have chosen his words carefully, since it was easy to break Hinata's smile without him intending to. "What I'm saying is that you did a good job, Lady Hinata. I didn't expect any less of you, because you're a Hyuga." She smiled once again. What do I do now?" Hinata asked, as she stood unsure, with her feet on the tree branch. "Now you have to try climbing to the top of the tree, and the way you do that is by maintaining complete control on each step that you take," Ko replied. Hinata's chakra control was astounding. It was almost as perfect as Niji's. Ko wouldn't have known if he hadn't activated his Byakugan and witnessed her manipulate her chakra to make it to the top. He'll have to let Lord Hayashi know that she was very adept at control. Perhaps this will help Hinata become more fluent in the ways of the secret fighting techniques that the main branch had to offer. Once Hinata was at the top of the tree, she deactivated her blood limit to get a better colorful view of full moon, which decorated the dark sky. Her ears twitched upon hearing a noise, and her head shifted in time to see Ko leaped from the grass and aimed a kick at her. Hinata dodged by back, flipping off the tree and landing gracefully on her feet. "I'm glad you used the chakra to help you land perfectly on the ground," Ko said, as a compliment. "Ko, why wasn't this chakra thing taught to me before?" Hinata asked, while feeling amazed at the supernatural maneuver she had just performed. The puzzle shifted into place, allowing her to see that this is what had been missing when Hinata uses the gentle fist. Her feet always felt weak and wobbly underneath her, but if she uses chakra on her feet, the same way she uses chakra to stay on a tree, then she'll be able to perform her gentle fist gracefully. The perquisite to chakra manipulation is a combination of many classes. Those classes were taught to you at the academy. It seems like an easy feat for you to understand now, but if you had been 7 years old, your mind wouldn't have comprehended it, unless you were a genius, he explained. Niji, Hinata murmured. "Did he already know this?" Hinata asked. He did," Ko replied. It was apparent to him what Hinata's suggestions implied. Since Niji had learned this at such a young age, he had already started with an advantage over her. The negative feeling of inadequacy slowly peeled off her like a fallen petal in spring. She would never measure her accomplishment next to Niji's. It was just too unrealistic. Hinata looked at the moon, while releasing a yawn. She wondered how her team was faring, and if Shikamaru got to spend his whole afternoon with Asuma-sensei. "Let's take the long way home, Ko," Hinata said thoughtfully. The adult Hyuga chuckled to himself, because Hinata was such a tiny thing that barely reached the height of his upper body. She was only 12 years old, yet her mannerism tried to assimilate that of an adult, like the way she stared off as she said those words. As though it had a deeper meaning when in reality it didn't. He had a feeling that Hinata just wanted to spend more time outside, because she had been cooped inside the Hyuga mansion without access to the outside world for nearly 2 weeks. At the same time, Hinata felt like her mind had matured just enough. That night had been their first night she hadn't cried herself to sleep. She'll be able to return to Team 8 in a few days, and she couldn't wait to show them that she wasn't going to be easily left behind. Sunny place, she murmured before she fell asleep. Team 10 were at the Nara forest. Their parents insisted that they pick up antlers together as a way to strengthen the bonds between them, and Asuma left them with instruction that they should also train. An hour went by and Shikamaru found himself laying on the grass next to a pile of antlers, when he was supposed to be training with his team, while Chuji was sitting on a rock eating chips, and Ino was practicing her taijutsu against a tree. Shika, Ino spoke as she stopped beating up the tree. She walked over to the lazy teammate that Asuma dumped on her. Asuma had left with some lame excuse about how he had to run to the blacksmith and pick up his weapon. What Shikamaru asked, while very aware that Ino was in one of her bossy moods again. Get your ass up, she commanded, placing her hand on her hips. You know what I heard as I was passing by the ramen place? I heard that Team 7 can walk on trees. Do you not care that we're being bumped towards the bottom of the list? We're so not relevant right now, which is why we aren't being sent on sea missions. It anguishes me to be on this team right now. You guys are so uncool. Chuji looked up from his spot and stopped stuffing his face. He appeared to be hurt over her words. Shikamaru's eyebrow furrowed. His narrowed brown eyes glared at his nagging teammate. Big deal. It's not like anyone expects much of me anyways. Not my mom, not my dad, not even Asuma Sensei. Besides, I already improved on my taijutsu, so why don't you cut me some slack? Shikamaru murmured darkly. She took a deep breath as to calm herself, but released a screeching sound before she spoke. I've had it with you, she said as she stormed away from the Shikamaru. Hey Shikamaru, I know Ino is being really bossy, but that's because you don't cooperate much, and it seems like she really wants us to be successful. She acknowledges that the whole team needs to be good for her to be good, Chuji said, after he got over his hurt feelings. Aren't you being a little selfish? And she also called you Shika, which is obviously a nickname, he pointed out. You make me feel troublesome when you're right, Shikamaru said as he stood up from the ground to go follow after his disappearing teammate. When Shikamaru found her, she was hugging a deer. The animal ran away when Shikamaru got closer, as if sensing the negative energy in the air. I'm your teammate Shikamaru, not Sakura, she said, almost hurt. Huh? He asked, confused as to how she even found out about that. I know you trained with her instead of training with me, Asuma Sensei told me, Ino said. How do you think that makes me feel? You know how I feel about her. Did you do it to spite me? Ino's eyes watered as she blinked back her tears. She was normally bold and lively, and seeing her like this while knowing he was the cause of her tears made him feel compromised. It wasn't in his nature to be brooding and burdensome to others. He felt guilty and less of a man. His father would definitely be disappointed in him. Ino, stop, Shikamaru said awkwardly. You're being presumptuous. She glared at Shikamaru as he shifted his weight on one side, feeling uncomfortable. This is humiliating for me, so I'll say it once. I'm sorry. Okay, he said. So let us go back and try to get this tree exercise down so that we don't become the Leaf Village's dead last. Shikamaru shoved his hands inside his pocket and turned around to go back to where he came from. Shikamaru didn't see the devious smile on Ino's lips. I found his weakness, Ino thought to herself. If she had known all it took was a couple of glistening tears on her cheek to get him to feel guilty, she would have done it earlier. Yoshino dropped by the Nara forest, with Inoichi and Shikaku trailing behind her. The only one missing was Chuji's father because he was out on a mission at the time. The three witnessed the next generation training together, trying to get down the chakra exercise. The three genin paused at the appearance of the adults. Shikamaru, is that all you got? Yoshino said, while shaking her head. When your father was your age, he was already a chunin. Shikaku placed a hand on his wife's shoulder and shook his head. He normally doesn't confront her, but they agreed that there were lines they shouldn't cross when it comes to parenting. They made a vow not measure Shikamaru against Shikaku's great accomplishments. Troublesome. Just take the antlers and go, Shikamaru murmured to himself, but she was too far to hear it. Daddy Ino ran towards Inoichi and hugged him. He picked her up and pecked her on the cheek. Keep it up, you're doing great managing your team. You're a born leader, Ino, Inoichi said proudly. I know, Daddy Ino said. As her dad placed her down, Yoshino opened up a sealing scroll on the ground, next to the antlers, and Shikaka helped with placing all the antlers on top of it, and sealed it. Chuji never stopped being amazed over such magic every time he witnessed it. Wow, I want to learn how to do that. That way I can seal all my food and chips inside, he said. His interest had peaked so much that he stopped eating chips. Yoshino smiled kindly at the young chubby boy, earning a glare from Shikamaru, who barely receives those kinds of smiles from his mom. Asuma will teach it to you, I'm sure, Yoshino said. But if you ever get impatient, just come by on a weekend and we'll work on it. Her eyes then landed on Ino. You're also welcome too, of course, she said. Thanks, Mrs. Nara, Ino said politely. It was after the three adults left that Asuma finally returned from his trip to the blacksmith. Trailing close behind him was a timid creature that could be mistaken for a mouse. Asuma stood before his team, who were obviously confused as to why Hinata Hyuga was there with him. Don't worry, I got your folks' permission before bringing her here, Asuma said as he saw Shikamaru's eyes narrowing dangerously at him. This little tomato rolled out of a bush while I was on my way back, he explained. Asuma-sensei, Hinata said, while her face turned into the color of her nickname. Ino and Chuji laughed. It seems no one escaped Asuma-sensei and his nicknames. The scene made Shikamaru cringe inwardly, as his fears were realized. Hinata Hyuga had become a stalker. She probably stalked Asuma and accidentally got caught because he was a jounin, so of course he would be aware of a mere genin following him around. Shikamaru didn't even want to know of how the situation had actually played out. Something similar to what Shikamaru imagined happened. Asuma had walked out of the blacksmith's store, and he noticed a constant flickering chakra following him. When he approached the chakra, he found Hinata on a tree. She lost her balance from the tree she was on, and landed gracefully on a bush. Asuma then shifted next to the rustling bush and spoke to it. I see you completed the walking tree exercise, that's nice. He praised the rustling bush. So did Kurenai send you with a message or something? I want to help Team 10 with their tea training, Hinata said. So could you request me? She blurted out in a fit of panic. Hinata didn't think she was going to get caught by Asuma. Together, they went to Team 8 training grounds, where Kurenai greeted her boyfriend by placing him under a genjutsu of her kissing him on the cheek. She dispelled the genjutsu right away, as he smiled. Can I borrow Hinata so she can motivate some of my students? He asked her. Yeah, of course, Kurenai said. In return, can I borrow your team one of these days? I want to put Team 8's tracking to the test. Yeah, sounds reasonable, Asuma replied. Thus, that is how Hinata ended up there at the Nara forest. Hinata. Ino skipped over and hugged her. Oh my god, I think I've gotten taller than you, she said, as she stood shoulder to shoulder to measure herself. I don't really see the difference, Hinata said. Chuji was the only one that asked Asuma-sensei why Hinata was there. The older man looked at the blushing genin and nodded to her. Why don't you show them what you can do? Tomato, Asuma asked. Hinata made her way, almost robotically, to a tree. She took a deep breath to calm herself, otherwise she wouldn't be able to control her chakra. She laced her feet with chakra and leaped high in the air to land on a tree branch. That had been impressive enough, but she took it a step further and walked under a tree branch, while upside down, like a bat. If you can do it, then I bet it'll be a piece of cake for me. After all, I was kind of better than you, Ino said. With a wide smile on her face, Chuji moved his chips to the air, as if toasting to Hinata's accomplishment with a glass of wine. Meanwhile, Shikamaru looked slightly baffled. It had been 2 weeks and a few days since he had last seen her. Not that he was counting or anything. How much had she improved since then? Shikamaru walked up to the tree with a serious expression on his face. He tilted his head and looked at Hinata. She had shifted her position so that she was now sitting on the branch of said tree. He was aware that his laziness was hereditary, and he loved and embraced his lazy personality wholeheartedly, but being surrounded by work-oriented and overly hyped genins forced him to hike along for the journey. He pulled out a kunai from his pouch to use it in order to help him not fall on his back. His other friends followed his example on different trees. By pulling out a kunai to help break their fall, Byakugan Hinata activated her Byakugan upon seeing Shikamaru repeatedly fail. "Why, you're not using enough chakra," Hinata said. "T tried to increase the flow." Yeah, that's easier said than done," he mumbled while glaring at the enemy tree. "My turn, Hinata. Watch me," Ino said with confidence. She ran up to a different tree, and was able to stand against it for more than 3 seconds, before stabbing the trunk with a kunai. "Ino, you were amazing. Just keep trying and you'll get it in no time," Hinata said. Her eyes were assessing Ino's chakra floating through her. Ino was right when she said she was basically as good as her when it came to chakra control. "Me next," Chuji said. But each time he tried, he ended up shattering the tree in half. "Why, you're expelling too much chakra, Chuji. Try using less, like a lot less," Hinata replied. Asuma made his way towards a tree and leaned against it. He pulled out a cigarette pack, tapped it, put it in his mouth and lit it up with his favorite custom-made lighter. The lighter was from the time he was one of the knights who protected the feudal lord of the Fire Country. He smiled to himself as he took a drag and watched Hinata do her best to help Team 10 get it right. Shikaka told him that there was a way to make chakra exercise easier for all of them, but Asuma stood by and didn't say anything to see if Shikamaru would get an idea of how to make the whole process much easier. Shikamaru groaned for the umpteenth time since he had started the exercise. On his last attempt, he didn't even bother breaking his fall by stabbing the kunai on the tree. Instead, he allowed his back to connect against the ground as a grunt escaped his mouth. He lay there, blinking, while looking up at Hinata. The sun made her hair look like the color of the night sky. It danced along to the breeze that blew past her. He was openly staring at her, testing his theory of her being oblivious. She kept her attention on Ino, while ignoring Shikamaru and thinking he was merely looking at the sky. But that couldn't have been it. Hinata realized the sky was covered by the thick dents of trees and leaves. Her curiosity got the best of her as she began to feel insecure. Hinata glanced down, with an innocent look on her face. When their eyes met, his face remained impassive, but his heartbeat sped inconsequentially. He didn't break eye contact, and waited for her to look away. She looked away after thinking that Shikamaru was just looking at the leaves dancing above the forest. Asuma was still leaning against a tree, when his eyes drifted to the lazy boy who seemed to be trying to burn a hole through the tree branch Hinata was sitting on. "Hey, slacker, get off your back, will you?" Asuma said. Shikamaru grunted, before closing his eyes. "I'm trying to decide whether this fruitless training is worth the effort or not. It's obvious I'm not going to get it down right away. Since my control isn't on par with Ino's," Asuma let out a sigh. He was disappointed that Shikamaru wasn't using his head to figure it out. Was he placing too much faith on the boy? Could it be that Shikamaru is just good at shogi, but not good at actual real-life strategies? If that's how it is, then why don't you spar with Hinata? Taijutsu and ninjutsu are allowed, Asuma replied. Hinata's attention snapped towards Asuma. Her heart swelled with happiness at the mention of her name. The way he said her name was enough for her heart to beat instrumentally. With Asuma as the orchestrator, Asuma heard from Kurenai that his father had gotten involved with the Hyuga's leader. Hinata had been missing from training for 2 weeks, so Asuma wanted to see if she had improved in any way. Pretty soon, Hinata was off the tree and next to Shikamaru. She offered her hand to help him stand. He rolled his eyes before accepting it. "Sensei, can I watch?" Ino asked. By then she had been able to take 5 steps up the tree without falling. She was close to the top. Upon seeing this, Asuma thought, why not? Then I'm coming too. I get scared if I'm out here by myself, Chuji said. Why the hell not? Asuma replied with a shrug. The 4 genins followed Asuma towards a clearing in the middle of the forest. Hinata and Shikamaru made their way towards the center. They stood a few yards away from each other. Hinata took a weapon out of her leg pouch and looked towards her curious opponent. Wheel. Start when this stabs the grass, she said, and tossed the weapon in the air. Once the battle began, both genins leaped backwards, but over different reason. Shikamaru was being a bit more cautious because Hinata had gotten better at chakra manipulation, and Hinata knew that there was something similar about both Niji and Shikamaru, and the way their eyes looked during a fight. They both looked like they were scheming something. Finally making the first move, Hinata laced her feet with chakra, and zigzagged across the field in only 5 leaps. She noticed the ghostly surprise in his eyes when she was inches away from him and landed a strike, but thanks to the wonder of substitution, Shikamaru managed to sneak away. "Go Hinata, beat that lazy bum," Ino yelled from the sideline. "Don't listen to her, Shikamaru, you're our man. Sensei and I are rooting for you," Chuji said. "Byakugan," she said, instantly catching him trying a sneak attack from behind. She shielded his punch with her forearms and sent him flying a few feet with her palm strike. "I can't get close to her like before," Shikamaru thought, so he decided to change his tactics during the seconds it took for him to get back up his feet. His hand moved fluently as he created the signs for in release. He manipulated the movement of his shadows and readied himself for the impending assault. Each time she tried to get close to him, he didn't let her, as she almost got caught. Eventually she remembered the kunai stabbed on the ground, which Shikamaru was standing close by. Hinata thought back to the spar she had with Naruto and how he had used it since it was part of the environment. When their eyes met, she smiled innocently. This didn't settle well with Shikamaru. His eyes shifted to the kunai next to him, but he had been too late to react. Hinata substituted her location with the kunai, and was in front of him within seconds. She sent him flying again, this time with a kick, as his body just barely avoided a tree. When he got up, she had disappeared out of his peripheral vision, whereas his head moved around until he found her. She was right behind him, and her gentle fist hit a substitution. "Where's he? Let me guess, behind me." Hinata swung her body around to face Shikamaru, as she dodged his shadow, by running up against a tree. When she leaped off, she landed in front of him. Shikamaru dodged her strikes, while never breaking his hand signs. A falling leaf made him take notice of his environment. They were near enough trees now, which was in his favor. There was an overabundance of shadows he had at his disposal to control. He noticed a particular tree with 2 holes, no doubt made by some animal that decided to make it its home. On the outside, he looked disinterested, but he was fighting himself to hide a smug smile. He manipulated his shadows in hopes of getting her to corner herself against that tree. Hinata did a side aerial to avoid one of his shadow that kept spreading in size, but then she ran up to a tree, falling into Shikamaru's trap. She was standing with her feet against the trunk, watching as Shikamaru just stood there. "Tree climbing is kinda nice, isn't it?" Hinata said as she turned off her Byakugan. He figured that was her way of taunting him. In turn, he finally couldn't hold back the smug smirk from forming on his lips. "Yeah, I bet it is," he replied, smiling wickedly. Unbeknownst to her, his shadow snuck inside the hole of the tree. When it came out of the tree, and near Hinata's location, she didn't notice the slithering snake-like shadow. By the time she did, she tried to leap away but couldn't because she had already lost control of her body. Shikamaru knew the event that would quickly follow, which is why he had been standing by. Hinata's shadow had been captured. This meant she would lose complete control of her chakra, prompting her body to fall from the tall tree almost immediately. Shikamaru pushed his legs forward in time to capture her in his arms, but he fell on his back, because he had misjudged her weight or his strength. "That hurt," he grunted in pain, still on his back while his eyes were closed. To save himself from the embarrassment of looking at her, he kept his eyes closed as Hinata lifted herself off of him. When Shikamaru opened his eyes, he saw Hinata kneeling next to his body, with her palm aimed at what was no doubt a very vital area on his neck. As Shikamaru, "I guess I win," Hinata said, while pressing her palm gently against his throat, as if showing him where she would strike to kill him instantly. He said with a smile, looking almost too happy for someone who lost. Somewhere along the battle, he gave up. He had thought of so many ways of defeating her, but what was the point? He was a strategist that had barely gotten any better at taijutsu. While she obviously exhibited tremendous improvement overall, it wouldn't have been fair if he had won. So he had decided to lose on purpose in hopes that she could see her own progress by defeating him. His hand clasped around the hand that was still pressed on his neck, and the sudden skin contact while outside the battle shocked her. Shikamaru didn't let go even though he was just as confused as to why he reached out to her in the first place. But he was quick to think of some reason to explain why he held her hand. Troublesome, this is your fault, so help me up, he said. Hinata couldn't see how any of this was her fault, but she got up and tightened her grasp around his hand as she helped him. Off the ground, they both let go in unison. So Shika, do you see now why we can't be left behind? Ino said as she approached the two with Chuji and Asuma behind her. That wasn't too bad, Tomato, Asuma said. While grinning at the blushing Genin, he knew Shikamaru had let the girl win, but even if she had lost, it doesn't change the fact that she improved maybe by 15%. Can't wait to be able to leap and fight on trees, Chuji said, excitedly. Let us go back to our training spot. He turned around and started marching back towards the place they left their ninja bags. Everyone turned to follow Chuji except for Shikamaru. The lazy boy walked over to Hinata's forgotten weapon and inspected it in his hand in a thoughtful manner. Troublesome, Shikamaru thought to himself. I was letting myself be swayed by the energetic idiots around me, that I didn't stop to think of the easy way out of this. Ino, wait, Shikamaru said, loud enough for the group that was walking away to stop. Watching Hinata substitute herself with a kunai made me remember your mind technique transfer, Shikamaru said while walking up to Hinata and handing her back her weapon. Asuma's eyebrow went up in interest. Ino looked as though she had also figured it out. You think it could work? Ino asked doubtfully. What are you two talking about? Chuji asked. While lost, he knew Shikamaru hated to explain stuff, but that didn't shy him away from asking. Well, it's like this, with Ino's mind transfer technique, she can help us catch up to her almost immediately. Her chakra control is really good, so she'll be able to control our body and communicate with us. She can show us the exact amount of chakra we need to stand and walk against a tree, therefore efficiently cutting our training efforts by 90%. I don't want you guys leeching off of me, but I'll do it, Ino said, reluctantly. After all, she was the one who wants her team to be badass. Shikamaru, you're a genius, Chuji said, as he patted his friend on the back. No, I'm not, Shikamaru said, humbly, but my father is, Shikamaru, Asuma said. And the seriousness of his voice made the Shikamaru glance up at his teacher. In the background, Ino tugged on Chuji and Hinata and pulled them away to give the two time alone. Once the three genin were out of hearing range, Asuma spoke again. But this time, he was less demanding in his tone. Do you understand that your team needs you just as much as you need them? From now on you will take training more seriously. There's no going back. You'll train when I tell you to train, and you'll rest only when I say you can. Shikamaru felt awkward to be spoken to in such a way. Asuma looked concerned, the same kind of concern he often found in the expression of his father. I guess I have to apologize to you two just like I apologized to Ino, Shikamaru replied. I'm sorry, Asuma-sensei. I'll try to be more tolerable. Asuma rolled his eyes and chuckled. Sometimes I get the feeling that you want to hide who you truly are, Asuma said. It took me a few tries to figure out that your IQ is over 200, you're a genius, and it's like you purposely try to hide it even from your parents. Why ask that, Shikamaru, and don't brush me off like you always do. Look, I just hate being the way I am. It's like I'm forced to do something with my life just because of this inherited gene which I didn't ask for. Plus I find myself getting further away from my friends as my mentality is becoming adult-like. But guess what? I don't fit in with the adults because I'm a damn kid, Shikamaru said bitterly. Asuma seemed taken back, but he quickly hid his surprise. Let us talk some more over a game of shogi tomorrow, Asuma said. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. Don't give me that look. You're probably thinking, what do you know? But guess what? I don't exactly fit in either with my peers even though I'm an adult. Probably has something to do with being the Hokage's son. What do you make of that? They're probably afraid that you'll get them into legal trouble if they ever get on your wrong side, Shikamaru said as he looked away. So you see, being an adult doesn't mean you'll always fit in, Asuma said. Sometimes your problems follows you into adulthood. Take it from someone who knows and also tried to run away. Quite literally, running away does seem tiresome, Shikamaru said. Asuma laughed while ruffling Shikamaru's hair. He then walked past his student and headed to where the other genins were waiting. Shikamaru soon followed after, as he analyzed the conversation that was previously spoken. For the first time since he joined Team 10, Shikamaru believed that Asuma-sensei was getting the hang of being a mentor. But what does he know? He's just a kid. The sour look doesn't suit you at all, Asuma said one morning, after sneaking inside Kurina's apartment through an open window. Asuma knows her enough to figure out that she was displeased about something. Did you get a mission? He asked. Is it that obvious? Kurinai said and sighed. Izumo and Kotetsu, you know how they're always together, so the two are going to be sent on a mission, and my team is stuck greeting the people who enters or exits the village, Kurinai complained, while moving around the kitchen to make 2 cups of tea. But you never know if that C mission might turn into an A or B rank, Asuma chuckled. Asuma, we both know that it's unlikely, and I have to be there with my team every day. This week, on a 5-hour morning shift, she said bitterly. And how does your team feel about this? Asuma noticed Kurinai's expression finally lost her anger and got replaced with an endearing smile. They're excited, she said. I just don't get them sometimes. Is it just the rank that excites them? I mean, it's their first C mission after all. Yeah, that must be it, Asuma replied. Izumo and Kotetsu, huh? Do you think they're, together? Kurinai covered her mouth and laughed. I wouldn't be surprised if they are more than just best friends, she replied. Located right before the gates was a wooden booth of some sort, with a long rectangular desk and several chairs. Teammates stood before Izumo and Kotetsu. Kotetsu had long, dark spiky hair that nearly reached his shoulder. For reasons the genins didn't understand, Kotetsu had a strip of bandage that stretched around his face and across the bridge of his nose. He had a small beard on his chin. He carried 2 big weapons behind his back. He seemed like the cheery and relaxed guy out of the two, who spoke in a chill manner as he explained to Team 8 what the job basically entailed them to do. You pretty much sit there all day, with a piece of paper to document who goes in and out. The paper has to be handed to the Hokage every day after the end of your shift, Kotetsu explained. Kotetsu, we both know we don't just sit. We keep our senses entirely heightened in the event someone tries to walk in by us. We've caught a lot of idiots trying genin-level genjutsu on us, and also a ranks genjutsu. We've also caught people trying to walk in while under a transformation technique, so keep your eyes and senses sharp, pay attention to details and you'll do fine, Izumo said. Izumo seemed to balance out Kotetsu, since he was the responsible one out of the two. He had brown hair with a side bang which swept across to cover his dark eyes. His forehead protector also worked as a bandana which was a dark blue color. Hello, if you haven't noticed, you're standing in front of an Inuzuka right now. Teammate is definitely right for this job, right? Akamaru Kiba said, as Akamaru barked while drooped over his head. Not just an Inuzuka, but also an Aburame and a Hyuga. To add to his point, Shino said stoically, Kurinai-sensei is a genjutsu master so we'll keep the village safe, Hinata added. Kotetsu grinned, almost idiotically, compared to the slight smile Izumo had. They both nodded to Kurinai and walked off through the gates, to go off on a mission. Wait, Shino said. He used his bugs to block their paths. You two need to sign in the log stating you're exiting the village. The Aburame genin grabbed the slip and a pen, and handed it to Izumo, the more responsible one. Ah, right, sometimes we forget we're not exempted from this, he replied as he signed in both of their names, and handed it back to Shino. You better come back alive or I might take your job, Kiba yelled after the 2 disappearing adults. Kotetsu raised his arms slightly in the air, and waved without turning around. Kotetsu chuckled to himself, thinking back to what Izumo had said to those kids. Izumo, you didn't have to lie to them, Kotetsu said. We don't really catch many people sneaking inside. That's a rare occurrence. He then started laughing. But I get why you did it. Genins are so adorable and hopeless. It makes you want to mess with them before they grow up. Izumo merely shrugged his shoulder as he kept his eyes ahead while they moved quickly through the forest. I only did it to make you smile, Izumo said. Plainly, he could hear Kotetsu almost miss his footing on a tree, prompting Izumo to smile. It was 7 a.m. when Team 8 Genins let out a yawn in unison, but it didn't stop Kiba from being overly cheerful, while Akamaru took a nap on his head. This is so cool, I hope we catch a lot of bad guys trying to slip through, Kiba said, as he sat behind the desk, while fidgeting around uncontrollably. He wasn't used to sitting around for too long. Be careful what you wish for, Kiba. I prefer if we don't experience that just yet. We're a tracking team, remember that, Kurenai warned him, while sitting next to him. She chuckled softly because it was thanks to Izumo that Kiba was this excited. She didn't mind him messing with her Genins. She smiled to herself. I'm so sleepy, Hinata said as she let out a yawn. Byakugan, she yawned out while surveying the area. There doesn't seem to be anything suspicious around. The veins around her eyes subsided as her eyes reverted back to normal. What do you think would be the perfect time of day to perform an assault? Kiba wondered out loud. I would do a sneak assault at nighttime if I were a missing nin, Shino said. Both boys looked at Hinata and waited for her input. I don't know, she replied. Kurenai remained quiet as her mind drifted to the person she missed the most. She wished she could be in Asuma's arms right now. The next day, a familiar team approached the gates. Team Kakashi stopped by the gatekeepers and was surprised to see Team 8 taking up the task. Kakashi signed the log and exchanged a few words with Kurenai. While dropping the name of Asuma, Hinata heard half of the conversation, but thought nothing of it. After all, Kurenai and Asuma were once teammates, so it wasn't weird for Kakashi to be talking about Asuma's Sakura. Naruto, good luck on your mission, Hinata said. She noticed beside Team 7 was an older woman with a kid. Hinata figured it was an escort mission. Thanks, Hinata, let us spar sometime after I get back, Naruto said. No chance, Naruto, Kiba spat. Hinata only trains with us, right? Akamaru the puppy barked in agreement, even though they both knew that wasn't entirely true since Team 10 had stolen Hinata for one day about 2 weeks ago. Who asked your opinion? Naruto said. Sasuke pulled Naruto by the collar because half of Naruto's body was already over the desk, as if he was going to fight Kiba right then. Calm down, you idiot, Sasuke grunted out. Ugh, boys, Sakura murmured to herself. She then turned to Hinata. I'll tell you all about the cool things I saw on the trip when I get back, Sakura said. Oh okay. It was the next day, when it all came together inside Hinata's head. Team 10 stopped by the gatekeepers. The Genins exchanged greetings and they waited in silence as Kurenai and Asuma spoke to each other. Team S10 first C mission, Asuma said. We're gonna do some intelligence gathering about a group of thug who probably has a Chunin rank missing nin. Backing them up and causing trouble, Asuma explained to her. Don't you dare die out there, Kurenai said. You better come back with your team in one piece. Asuma, who had been smoking, put out the cigarette and disposed of it by a trash bin nearby. He strolled back to Kurenai and leaned over the desk and placed a kiss on the corner of her mouth. Shikamaru's eyes widened. He never guessed that his bold sensei would do something like that in public. His eyes landed on Hinata, who looked just as shocked. Aha, Shichuji, I was right. They are dating, Ino said, as she pointed a finger towards Asuma. Both adults rolled their eyes over Ino's childish behavior. They didn't want to know that they were being talked about between the Genins. I'm an Inuzuka, so you can imagine I already knew, Kiba said to Ino while tapping his nose. Ino, understanding what he had implied, grinned back at him. Kiba, you can't use your last name as a way to explain everything. Why? Because it's ambiguous. It makes you appear like you didn't know anything in the first place, Shino commented. I'll be back before you know it, Asuma said to Kurenai. He chuckled as he turned to look at Hinata. Tomato, thanks again for the other week when you helped my team. Why you're welcome, Sensei, Hinata replied, half-heartedly. As Team 10 left through the gate, Shikamaru took a last look at Hinata. She seemed to be staring off, somewhere far away. He sighed loudly, as he picked up his pace to catch up with his team. Troublesome, he said out loud. But such word was always too vague. Ino thought Shikamaru's complaint was because he felt too lazy to run a far distance while leaping from tree to tree. Chuji believed Shikamaru said troublesome, because he wanted to sleep, but Asuma was the only one who got the closest. He got the feeling Shikamaru felt conflicted over a problem that had to do with Hinata. A gloom descended, very subtle at first. Their first C-rank mission blurred by, and Kurenai held a meeting between Team 8 afterwards, outlining the next things the team would work on. She announced that walking on water and breaking out of a Chunin-level genjutsu was at the top of the list, and following that, they would have physical exercise to increase their speed. On her day off, Hinata was at home. It wasn't too hard to keep a solemn expression during training with Ko. If the gentle Hyuga noticed the dip in her mood, he didn't show it. It was in her room that Hinata had difficulty not feeling self-loathing, because when she first found out the news, she hadn't been very happy for Kurenai-sensei. Hinata couldn't comprehend the nature of those twisted feelings of jealousy she had inside. She stood in front of a mirror. She was tiny and flat-chested thanks to the bind around her chest, but flat-chested nevertheless compared to the adult that Kurenai was. Hinata walked away from the mirror and lay in bed. She had this notion that when Asuma turns 35, she would been 20, and that things would then be fine, that all she had to do was patiently wait for the right age to act. A 15-year difference between them wasn't unheard of. Men in position of power did it all the time. They married much younger partners, so it was easy for Hinata to have entertained her fantasy for this long. She could not redescribe the feelings she felt when she was exposed to the truth so blatantly, but she remembered the feeling of coldness spreading throughout her hands, freezing and numbing. She also remembered the inability to breathe, as her throat felt dry. Her heart had skipped, the same way a person's heart skips when they are told bad news of a precious person, or treasured pet, bad news of how they won't make it, and how they won't wake up ever again. It felt similar to the way a person felt, as they picked up the lifeless corpse of the pet companion they had by their side for almost a decade. Hinata was surprised that tears didn't fall out right there. And then, what stopped them was probably the way Asuma spoke her nickname and thanked her for helping his team. While tending to a garden, Hinata had accidentally overwatered the plants. In a fit of panic, she dropped the turquoise watering can. She ran through the mansion to find the Hyuga maid from the lower branch family, who was paid to work few shifts per week. Hinata tucked onto her sleeve, and it was then that she had a reason or excuse to expose her deepest feelings of despairs. Hinata said, to the maid, but after uttering that first word, her chest started to hurt as if she had been holding back a sob. You see, she said, this time it was like a water pipe burst broken from the pressure inside. I overwatered the plants, Hinata said between hysterical cries. She used her fist and wrist, the back of her hands, and her palms to wipe her tears. She did a rotation of this, trying to find a dry spot of skin to dry her face. My lady, the maid crouched on one knee, to her level and brushed her hair. This isn't something to cry over. I know the garden belonged to your mother, but there truly isn't any reason to cry. She opened her arms and hugged the girl. I'll call someone over, with wind affinity, and have her dry the plant's soil so that they don't die. Thank you, Hinata said. While in the maid's arms, Ko Hyuga, who had been walking by, witnessed the scene. He only hoped that whatever storm going on inside Hinata's heart passes by. Danzo left the meeting room, walking side by side with Hamura and Koharu. Hamura and Koharu made up the Leaf Village's council. Their words and decisions held tremendous power. Inside the meeting room remained a frowning Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage. His eyes were narrowed as he stood by the window and stared ahead towards the village's gates. Hamura and Koharu are retired ninjas who became convinced that the Leaf Village needs to hold the Chunin exams right away. They felt anxious because they're lacking in the Chunin rank department. Hiruzen didn't see a problem with the Elder's decisions, since Chunin exams are held twice a year. The problem was that Danzo pushed the idea of giving the new rookies a chance to participate. He claimed that the feudal lords of other countries would be interested. Nevertheless, the elders offered their word of approval. Hiruzen had to send invitations to several villages to notify them that the Leaf Village would be hosting the Chunin exam real soon. That was the easy part. The hard part was facing Kakashi, Asuma, and Kurenai. Danzo, no doubt you're up to something, Hiruzen thought to himself. Shino and Kiba were the first to arrive at the training grounds. There, they awaited for the rest of the Team 8. When Hinata finally appeared in front of their range of vision, they hadn't known what to say. Waiting for the murmuring to subside, Hinata smiled faintly at her teammates. Hello, Hinata. Did someone in your family die? Kiba asked out of concern, because Hinata didn't look lively at all. She hadn't been lively for over a week, but they hadn't expect her show up wearing all black. Hinata had swapped out her gray shorts for black shorts, and it took that one change to make her appear like she was in mourning. But what actually completed the transformation was the gloomy aura that she carried around. And no, Kiba, Hinata said. On the other hand, Kiba wasn't so far off. Something did die. Her fantasy got completely crushed. She wanted to express without having to explain that she was indeed mourning over something, but she would never tell anyone that something is the loss of a future with Asuma by her side. Unbeknownst to them, Kurenai was already there, but they didn't see her because she masked herself completely and also casted an illusion that worked almost like looping a video footage of the three genins being by themselves. But it was Kiba that managed to break out of it because Akamaru started barking as a warning, to tell him that his senses were being messed with. Once Kiba broke out of the genjutsu, he used his chakra to get his teammates of it as well, prompting Hinata to feel shocked at Kurenai's presence. Hello my genins, Kurenai said with a cheerful smile which almost faltered upon seeing Hinata's solemn expression. Kurenai received the welcome she expected which lacked energy. After all, Hinata's depression was somehow washing over Kiba as well, therefore affecting his normal behavior pattern. I bet it's her stuck-up family that's the cause of her suffering, Kurenai thought sadly. But Hinata hasn't opened up to me about the problem. I guess she feels like she is strong enough to carry the burden on her own. That fool, she should know. She talked to me and tell me everything. Today it's the start of breaking illusions. Kiba, I can see you're a natural since you managed to break it without any trouble. She praised the boy. Hinata, Shino, I'll keep casting different illusions on you guys until you're able to break free. Kiba, I want you to work on walking on water. Okay sensei, Kiba replied, lacking the energy he normally has. A week of vicious training on breaking illusions went by, before the team had become adept at it, Kiba being the best, followed by Hinata and then Shino. One fateful afternoon of training, Kurenai saw the Hokage's brown hawk flying above the training grounds. Team 8 was in front of her, panting on the ground after breaking one final A-rank genjutsu, so they didn't notice how their teacher tensed up as she wondered why the Hokage was summoning all the jounins for a meeting. That'll be all for the day, Kurenai said. I'll see you tomorrow, at the same time as today. Sensei, what about missions? Kiba asked. I have a feeling we won't be doing missions for a while, Kurenai replied. Well my genins, I must go now. Pink petals floated out of the nothing, and swirled around her body before she disappeared. Ha, you think she's going on a date with Asuma? Kiba asked Hinata. I. Really wouldn't know, she said, while looking away. I'll see you tomorrow, Kiba. Shino, Hinata said as she bowed. Shino and Kiba looked at one another, as if to acknowledge to one another that Hinata's behavior was really strange. The streets of their beloved village was filling up, little by little, with foreigners, not just any type of foreigners, but menacing, tall, older and threatening-looking foreigners. Hinata noticed this as she entered the busy parts of town which had several inns located in the vicinity. Something big is going on, I wonder what, Hinata thought to herself. She couldn't hide to herself the fact that foreigners made her nervous, especially when they proudly sported their ninja forehead protector. Hinata had never witnessed so much diversity coming into the village. A delinquent-looking ninja, from the land of sound, bumped into her but not enough force to make her fall to the ground. Hinata knew it had been done on purpose, but she still apologized. To her surprise, the delinquent-looking ninja let it go without causing a scene. Hinata, Did he hurt you? Are you okay? Ino's voice came from behind after witnessing the scene. Next to Ino was Chuji. The dark blue-headed girl turned to her friend and smiled. I'm fine, Hinata replied. As her eyes looked around for a missing member of Team 10, Shikamaru's not with us. He probably decided to doze off by the riverbank after Asuma-sensei treated us to tea and dumplings, Chuji said, surprising her. Oh, it's just kind of strange to not see him with you guys, Hinata said, as if feeling the need to explain why she expected his presence around Team 10. What are you talking about, Hinata? Do you have amnesia or something? Shika's only with us when it's necessary to be around us, Ino replied while laughing. Anyways, see you around. Oh, and would you please wear something more colorful next time? You look like you went to a funeral, Ino said before she left. On her way home, Hinata took a detour. The origin behind such actions all began with a thought. I'm so ignorant about the little things and little details that matters. I am just as bad when it comes to noticing important things about the people around me. Such thought gave rise to an idea that maybe her mind needed training. Hinata accepted that she wasn't as perceptive as she should be, but she wasn't sure how perceptive she needed to be. Being ignorant can be blissful, until the truth shocks you awake. If she hadn't been so naive, she wouldn't have put herself in such vulnerable position where her heart could be easily broken. What's wrong with me pinning for a man that's older than me? I should have known he was taken. And just like Chuji said, Hinata found Shikamaru in his little domain by the riverbank that floated under a bridge. The genin girl walked close to his domain and sat next to him on the grass, while setting her ninja bag to the side. He was laying down on his back, with his hands behind his head, while his leg was crossed over another. She came to him to ask for a favor, but she remembered how she failed to keep her word to help him train about a month ago, because her family decided to keep her inside the house to train her for 2 weeks. Thus, she changed her mind about asking for his help as she stared at the running water floating under the bridge. After all, he'll want something in return again, probably, and she wasn't sure if she was trustworthy enough to keep her end of the bargain. Shikamaru glanced at her, his eyes taking in her appearance for about 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds he could see all needed, hence how he knew she was still not over Asuma-sensei. His eyes went back to looking at the clouds, and they both never gave a verbal greeting, just silent acknowledgments. He wondered if she found him again by coincidence, since it was a small village, but he wasn't that curious to ask, not one to seek to have pointless conversations. Shikamaru decided to break the silence by asking her a question in case her answers might provide clues to something that's been bothering him about the village. Did you notice any jounins on your way here? Shikamaru asked, hoping that it was his imagination that there had been a lack of jounins. Shikamaru avoided the populated town, and took a different path to get where he was, but still, he should have bumped into a few jounins along the way. Hinata visibly flinched when his voice cut through the silence like a knife. She hadn't seen Shikamaru in weeks, so hearing him talk, frankly, gave her a shock because his voice sounded different than what she remembered. It sounded deeper, and slightly older. Hinata's response got caught in her throat, but she eventually spoke. And no, use your Byakugan and tell me if you see any nearby, he instructed her. I see them, they're all gathered inside the Hokage's office, Hinata said. Damn it, Shikamaru said, almost vehemently. Hinata's perplexing expression gave him a need to explain himself. I saw Asuma-sensei look concerned right before he left us earlier. We were having dumplings with tea, when a hawk flew over us, and he just stared at it, and left abruptly. Something's going on, and I don't know what it is. Shikamaru sat up, and started taking fistful of grass and pulling it from the ground. Hinata closed her eyes. As she lay on her back, Hinata looked the same way she had when they had played that memory game. She was closing her eyes really shut as if trying to recall a memory. It was the same with my team, I'm sure of it. I remember the sound of a hawk, and Kurinai-sensei cut our training short, as she even said that we may not go on missions for a while. Hinata opened her eyes and stared at him to see if her information had helped him in any way. He seemed to be thinking about it. I saw a lot of foreigners in town too, she added. Thanks to the information you shared, I got a pretty good idea of what it is that's happening around here, Shikamaru said. She gave him a look, one that he never seen her give him before, so he wasn't sure what to make of it. What he asked her suspiciously. He heard her groan for the first time in his life. He chuckled. Why are you groaning, Shikamaru? Let us switch brains, she mumbled. I'll give you my brain, and I'll take yours. It was then he understood that she was probably frustrated over not being able to figure some things out. No thanks, he breathed out a sigh. Anyways, all the signs points to one thing, the Chunin exams. It's probably going to start soon. This worried him, because Asuma was the third Hokage's son, so who's to say that Asuma won petition Team 10 just by using the connection he has? And no way, yeah, it's troublesome. I just hope Asuma-sensei doesn't get any ideas of petitioning my team to participate, Shikamaru said. Hinata's heart started skipping wildly upon the thought of taking the Chunin exams. It felt like she had turned into a genin just yesterday. She breathed out a sigh, while convincing herself the Kurenai-sensei wouldn't think to ever to petition Team 8. It was too sudden. The silence that ensued didn't last for too long, as Hinata whispered something, but loud enough for his ears to pick up. I came here to find you, she said, with refined courage. She needed his help, and Shikamaru had proven himself again. He was her age, and his presence felt different. He seemed wiser, older, and smarter. How can she become like that to someone worthy of becoming her little sister's advisor? His hand movements paused as he stopped pulling grass out of the ground. Her words made his heart skip a little. Shikamaru then resumed to pulling out the grass when he figured Hinata just didn't know how to choose her words correctly in a way that doesn't lead to his brain shutting down for a second. He replied once he found his voice. I was hoping for some pointers of how to become more perceptive like you, Hinata said, leaving him feeling slightly proud of her, because her coming to him and asking him about this meant that she acknowledged that she was oblivious. A few book titles comes to mind to help you get started, Shikamaru replied, though all of them are a troublesome read. He then glanced at the oblivious girl next to him and wondered how deep her problem was. If the books he recommended to her turned her more pragmatic, then he'll have to accept and praise the author's credibility. I don't mind, so could you write it down for me, Hinata said as she sat up and searched her bag for a pen and notepad. There, fingers brushing as the item got passed to him, probably affected Shikamaru more than it did her, but Shikamaru didn't show it. He only hoped that she can understand his sloppy handwriting as he handed the notepad back to her. Thank you, Shikamaru, she said. Hinata put the notepad away inside her bag, and groaned again. What is it now? Shikamaru asked flatly. He wasn't sure if this is who Hinata was, or if his influence had rubbed some of his mannerism off on her. So what do you want in return? F for helping me. Hinata's question prompted his hand to fly to his face to cover his mouth. It was like he had a jester sleeping dormant inside of him that found entertainment in the simplest interactions with her. He felt amused that she remembered his claim of not helping others out of the kindness of his heart, and that much was true. His willingness to help derived from a hope that she'll become less oblivious and gullible, in other words, more easy to tease, because it would be nice for a change if her face could turn the shade of tomato after she catches him staring at her. That silly desire wasn't without a reason. About a week ago, Shikamaru came to a deduction on his own, while watching a cloud which was shaped in a way that reminded him of Hinata's head. He didn't know what to make of the shape at first, but after an internal monologue which danced close to denial, his logical part of his brain came out as the victor. But Shikamaru didn't embrace this as the certain truth. He still had his doubts because his mental state could be attributed to the way boys his age starts to feel towards girls. But anyways, he believed he may have feelings for her. That is why he reached out again, though this time he was in control, knowing that it was because he may have a crush on her. So he reached out and held her hand in his. His heart was skipping violently against his chest as he entertained the idea of asking her to have ice cream with him, sort of like a date maybe. Not that she would even notice that it was a date. His action perplexed her, but Hinata had this coping mechanism that helped her shield her from embarrassment, therefore, making the situation easier for her to deal with. She retrieved a memory of a similar situation that happened after the spar that took place at the Nara forest. She concluded that Shikamaru was asking for help since he was too lazy to get back on his feet. She stared at their joined hand, with a look of relief. She believed this was all he was asking of her in return. She can do this. I guess all he wants in return is for me to help him back on his feet. Yes, so simple. She tightened her hand around his and stood up on her feet. She then used her weight and pulled him the way one pulls a door that one T budge. But he finally budged when he realized what was probably going through her mind, so her problem ran deep. Shikamaru's lips were pressed together into a line as he looked annoyed. When they let go, he used the same hand that held hers just seconds ago and flicked her on the forehead, making her fair skin turn slightly red. That was the shade that came the closest to the one he wanted to see on her cheeks, Ao Hinata said, while rubbing the area he had just abused. What did you do that for? She asked. Because you're tiresome, Shikamaru said as he shoved his hands into his pockets. He changed his mind about inviting her along to have ice cream when he realized he couldn't take much of this. It was just too troublesome and not worth the trouble if it wasn't going to mean anything inside her head. Hence the reason he settled for waiting until he sees an improvement in her perception. He left after grunting some sort of word of goodbye. Hinata remained there looking a little lost and confused as she stared after Shikamaru as he walked away. She reached down and grabbed her bag. Her thoughts didn't linger too much on his confusing behavior. To her, Shikamaru was being Shikamaru. He seemed easily annoyed by things, even back from what she remembered at the academy, so she didn't think much of what took place. As she turned around and headed the opposite way home, one time, while drinking with his old man, Asuma heard Hiruzen make an offhand comment of how Kakashi had the potential to become Hokage. Perhaps that's what might have started it all. From then forward, Kakashi annoyed him, and his eerie aura of staged aloofness pissed Asuma so bad. The silver-haired Jounin was no doubt his father's favorite, so when they stood there before the third Hokage, Asuma decided to also take a step forward and petition Team 10. Partly because Kakashi had also petitioned his Team 7, that may have been too childish and brash on Asuma's part, but what aided in making his decision was that he had placed his faith on Ino's forceful ability to keep Shikamaru's laziness in check, and if things flows well and don't get clogged along the way, then Shikamaru's intelligence would become known after the Chunin exam, leading to a much-expected promotion for the lazy guy. Asuma smirked at his plan. Kurenai was still fresh in her title of Jounin since she had earned that title at the beginning of the year, yet she felt like she had the guts to petition her team. After all, Kakashi was petitioning his fresh Genins, which implied that it wasn't uncommon, so she thought it wouldn't be weird if she also stepped forward as well to give her oath that she believed that her Genins had a shot at it. She was proud to say that her team managed to complete their trainings and were taught skills essential for Chunin exam survival. Kurenai believed Team 8 had the advantage since they each had come from respected clans whose ability held a natural benefit over those ninja of normal upbringings. It was sad to admit, but true, which is why she was convinced they were fit to face off against other Genins, regardless of their age and prowess, because their secret weapon, which wasn't so secret, yet a bit overrated teamwork. The Chunin exams starts on the 1st of July. They all had 1 week to prepare. Hinata wordlessly interrupted her father with her presence. She stood before the bookshelf which was located in his study room, and strolled around trying to find the book titles written on the note which had been ripped out of her notepad. Her father watched her, curiously, and eventually got up from behind his desk and offered his help. When she handed the note with sloppy handwriting which no doubt belonged to someone close to Hinata's age, Hayashi's eyes widened momentarily. "These are adult books," her father commented, as he moved about effortlessly to find the books written on the list. "You may want to keep a dictionary close by." Book after book, Hayashi kept passing them over to Hinata until eventually a stack of 5 books rested on her arms. "Thank you, father," Hinata said, with a genuine smile, which after she strolled back to her room. Upon entering her room, Hinata walked over to her desk where she laid the stack of books. The urge to swim inside the pages was strong. Her mind chanted to her, "Read, read, read." She read over the words very carefully, while in the action of turning to the 23rd page, her mind immediately conjured up jumbled and meaningless images. They surfaced as if they had very little weight to it. She was trying to make sense, and organized the images in hopes that it would have some sort of meaning. Asuma's lighter, it had the same symbol as the sash he wore around his waist, the kanji for fire. That day, when Kurenai tried to politely kick her out of her apartment, Asuma's distinctive lighter rested on the table, next to the 2 cups of tea. Right away, a sensation of hopelessness and frustration flooded her very being after interpreting what that memory meant. I couldn't see what was before me. Hinata turned back to the pages of the book, while imprinting a new knowledge inside her head. She had to pause and pay close attention to things. The book hinted that she should actively do this every day. The goal was to gradually notice the smaller details that would hint that something is out of place. She bookmarked the page before shutting the book close. As far as Kiba was concerned, he felt ready for the Chunin exams. Without wording it, Shino also demonstrated a willingness to participate in the exam. It was Hinata who stared stupidly at the Chunin exam form. She thought she had a realistic view of the situation. She wasn't ready for this. She missed everything of importance that Kurenai-sensei explained, and only nodded once she went back to paying attention, in time to hear the last part of Kurenai's inspirational talk. And you guys already make me proud. And study hard. There was an explosion of excitement coming from Kiba and Akamaru, whose noise level snapped Hinata out of her thoughts. Shino scowled in annoyance, since the source of noise surprised him, therefore causing his bugs inside his body to go haywire for a few moments until he got them to calm down. Eventually, they were dismissed. Kiba wheeled around and marched off with Akamaru, to go home and share the news with his family. Shino followed a similar path. The only 2 left were Kurenai and Hinata. Let us go have some tea at my place. Hinata, Kurenai said, maybe we can talk about the Chunin exam, and any doubts you may have. Truthfully, she wanted to get to the heart of Hinata's sadness, but she invited her genin students under the pretense that they might just talk about the exam. Kurenai laid down 2 cups filled chai tea with honey on the table. She sat down across Hinata, while cupping her chin with one hand, elbow resting over the table. While peering over to the window, the tea remained untouched. Steeping, Hinata played around with the tea bag, swirling it inside the cup and watching its movement. Then she caught herself doing what she normally does, which was not pay attention. This is how I missed the details last time, Hinata thought to herself. She straightened her back inside as she stared at the older woman. She had disliked Kurenai for the last 2 weeks, but she woke up today thinking that it was enough, and that this had to stop. Kurenai-sensei, I've been feeling down lately because my heart's been broken, Hinata said. Kurenai paused so that she could make sure that she had heard the young girl correctly. I'm sorry to hear that, Kurenai said, kind-heartedly. I waited around, hoping that whatever is troubling you would go away. I didn't know it was a matter of the heart. Hinata, you're a lovable person, you know, so even if it hurts now, know that this was a gift. I can see that it ended painfully, but from pain comes wisdom. There's always a lesson to be learned from that. Yeah, there was, Hinata admitted. Tell me, was it one of the boys from Teen 10? I notice you've always been eager to spend time with them after practice, Kurenai said. There was a titter of nervous laughter coming from Hinata. And no, Hinata said. The older woman shook her head with a smile. She felt like she hit the mark with her guess, but she wasn't going to tell Hinata that her answer didn't convince her. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I just hope you get better, Kurenai said. Her tone of voice portrayed understanding. The doorbell ringing spooked her soul. Hinata flinched and her head snapped towards Kurenai, as if asking if she was expecting someone. That's probably Asuma. I'm surprised he didn't use the window, Kurenai said, while grabbing her tea in hand, and disappearing out of the room to answer the door. The freezing hands, the numbing feelings, they returned. Without as much as even touching her tea, Hinata stood up and joined Kurenai by the door. She avoided looking at Asuma and pretended to focus on Shikamaru, whose eyes lingered on her as they always did. Are you interested in taking the exam? Asuma asked her. I hope you decide to take it. I believe in you have potential to go far, he said. Why yes, I am, Hinata said. While looking at Asuma for the first time in a long time, she bit the inside of her bottom lip, while calling herself pathetic for coming to such quick decision about taking the exam just because Asuma said those words. She needed to run away, to get away from there, but didn't he know how to go about it? It was rude to leave Kurenai without as much of a sip from the tea she made for her. Her brain was being overworked with thoughts of what decision she should make, that she didn't stop to pay attention to the boy next to Asuma. Hey, did you get to read any of the books I recommended yesterday? Shikamaru asked. She finally looked at him, like really looked at him. Shikamaru had dark color under his eyes, which one gets from lack of sleep, but that's not what she was concerned about at that moment. Shikamaru, at the time, was the rope she needed to escape. Yes, I did. I read one chapter of a book, but it was a really difficult read, Hinata said. While smiling nervously and walking towards him, she swiftly put on her shoes, and locked arms with him while pulling him towards the door. Would you like to talk about it? She asked him, even though her actions made him feel like he didn't have a choice but to agree. Shikamaru turned his head to Asuma as he was walking outside of the door. Sensei, guess we'll play shogi another time. Be by Kurenai. Sensei, Hinata said over her shoulder. Asuma and Kurenai stared at the spot where their two students were. A few moments, they laughed, almost in sync. Once outside, Hinata let go of his arm. He stood in his familiar posture of hands tucked inside his pockets. He didn't mention anything about knowing that she used him as an escape, since nothing good would come from telling her that he knew about her broken heart. He hated how he was eager to be there for her in a blink of an eye. Where would you like to go? She finally asked. Hinata felt like she had to follow through with her word, or else she'll have to give the truth away. Anywhere is fine, he replied. As they walked, the summer sun almost evaporated his drive to want to hang out with her. There was a change in her mood upon walking past an ice cream stand. It doesn't escape his notice how big and bright her smile glowed after getting an ice cream cone. With 2 big scoops of some colorful flavor, she got one for him as well. Probably out of guilt, but he wasn't sure. Shikamaru suddenly paused on his track, as they were on their way to the park. It's not like it should matter. But why did it feel important to define what this was? Did he consider this a date? He looked down the road which led to her. She had already found some place to sit, and she was almost finished with her ice cream. She waved at him with one hand as though she was making sure he didn't lose her. Believing that it would reach her, he smiled. Like he normally does. Minutes passed of superficial words before it shifted into something of interest. The literature I've been reading speaks of motives and basically encourages me to ask question more like to question everything, Hinata said. And to pay attention to details. Her words were like persuasive rays of hope, since he had been wavering on his decision to act. So he took the time to assess the situation, as he was sitting next to her on the bench. So going by what you said, does that mean you're going to start questioning the motives behind the action of others? Shikamaru asked. It is part of the exercise on becoming more perceptive. So yes, Hinata said. He scoffed. Then what would drive a lazy guy like myself to be out here with you? He asked. His question momentarily surprised her because she didn't think to question his motive. You wanted to give our teachers some time alone, Hinata said, as though she wasn't sure of her response. That's too much work. I would just stolen the couch for a nap, and that would be equivalent to giving them alone time, he replied. Because we're friends, Hinata said. While still trying to answer his question about his motive behind joining her, Shikamaru paused, and rubbed his chin, as if contemplating the nature of their friendship for the first time. He searched for the perfect words, but in the end, he felt like he watched his chance fade away. It was strange. It's not that he wanted to hide himself at all, but confessing his feelings with the intention of getting something in return was not possible at the moment because of her broken heart, and he didn't want their so-called friendship to vanish with the summer breeze over something like this. Much to his dismay, he was forced to bend the truth a little. Yeah, because we're friends. He repeated her words back to her as confirmation that she was right. He wasn't going to let his honesty ruin everything. He yawned as the breeze picked up, prompting the leaves to rustle loud enough For Hinata's attention to be stolen away, she glanced up, staring at the tree above. But that didn't stop her from seeing Shikamaru shifting closer to her from the corner of her eyes. She turned her head and watched as he shifted his position, and brought his leg to rest on the bench. As his head rested on her lap, he lay on his side, facing the world, or the passing strangers whom would occasionally walk by. For reasons she didn't understand, she was at ease with the situation. Perhaps it may have been the fact that Shikamaru had gotten her used to physical contact, though that hadn't been his intention at all. Whether it was their shoulder brushing, their hand briefly touching as she helped him up, or simply sitting next to him as he took a nap, those small things had amounted to her building up some sort of tolerance when it came to physical contact. She almost didn't question it, until, "Hey, what do you make of my motive right now?" he asked. Shikamaru already decided that he didn't want to let truth ruin everything, but he was like a kid with a desire to let his secret just burst out of his mouth. He wondered if the overwhelming feelings he felt, or the heart pounding against his chest, would eventually cease. It didn't help that his nose was assaulted with a flowery scent which no doubt belonged to her. She giggled a response that sounded like, "You want to sleep and I'm being turned into a pillow." She stared at her friend whose head rested on her lap. Shikamaru's cheeks were red, and she figured it was probably from the summer heat. He replied, more as an acknowledgement. She was wrong, but also right. Of course he was sleepy. Last night, Asuma showed up by his house and handed him the Chunin exam form for him to fill up. He got only 4 hours of sleep. Thinking about his decision of taking the exam, "It sure beats lying on the grass," he said while trying to carefully maneuver his way out of the awkwardness he felt over being welcomed on her physical space. He could feel his face still burning. Shikamaru almost felt guilty for being so happy right now. "By the way, are you planning on taking the exam?" She glanced down briefly only to see that his eyes were closed. But he still answered her. He grunted out. "Asuma-sensei told me that if I don't participate, my whole team won't be able to take the exam. It's a group thing. It's so troublesome that I'm being forced into it. Wish I had known so I didn't waste my time thinking about my decision." "Oh," she said, disappointed because that means that she would let her team down if she were to choose not to participate. She wondered if Kurenai-sensei had informed them about that, but she had been too distracted to listen at the time. "Shikamaru, let us do our best," she said as her hand lightly touched his shoulder as a way to reassure the two, but she left her hand resting there. He was having a hard time trying to take a nap, feeling as though his heart would implode at any second. She leaned her head back to watch the tree above them once more. She believed it was her imagination. It probably was, but Hinata thought she caught a glimpse of a golden hue of hair disappearing, almost as if someone with blonde hair had been watching them. With Shikamaru pretending to be asleep, she was left alone with the voice inside her head. Her voice instructed her to watch the people walking by, and to study their body language so that one day she'll become more adept at reading people. If you made it this far, you're a true what-if plot legend, so let's all confuse the fake fans among us by spamming Naruto. If you want to see what happened to Hinata, make sure you blow this video up with likes. Till next time.